Exhausted by work that drains him body and mind, Itsuki Shinomiya starts doubting everything, his purpose, his future, and whether the money will ever come. After crushing work days, he slumps at the platform, clutching the last train like it's his only escape, exhaustion weighing him down and hopelessness crushing his chest. He wrestles with the idea of escaping to a parallel universe, dragging his mind back to how his love for anime and fantasy has been fading fast. As Itsuki starts imagining himself as an adventurer or hero, reality hits hard, and he feels like his dream is slipping away for good. He jolts awake and freezes. Turns out he's still trapped in reality, while the last train announcement keeps screaming through the air. Itsuki snatches the last train just in time, heart pounding with relief. Then he has no idea that a mysterious woman is closing in on him. The mysterious woman strides in and declares herself a goddess, and Itsuki is completely stunned by how real she looks. She tells him Itsuki's getting dragged into a parallel universe, even as he fights back with protests and total disbelief. Suddenly, Itsuki gets ripped into another world, only to learn he's already dead and has to rebuild his life from scratch. The goddess hands Itsuki a skill for his brand new life, and it knocks the wind right out of him, stunned, quiet, and unsure what comes next. Itsuki hesitates about stepping into a parallel world, but the goddess promises he made the right choice. He weighs his options hard: combat, power, or a different path the goddess lays out, trying to decide what he should pick. With sheer determination, Itsuki chooses a skill, ready to squeeze every bit of fun out of his second, amazing life. The goddess hesitates, then relents and accepts his pick, while quietly hinting there are even better options waiting just around the corner. She shoves him toward the first town, her voice sharp as she warns him, "Don't mess around, watch every step on the road." Itsuki stares down a monstrous nightmare, and the truth hits him hard. This parallel world is way more deadly than he ever imagined. He tries to bolt, yelling for the goddess, steaming because this isn't the slow, peaceful life he thought he was getting. Stunned by the brutal truth, he can't help but wonder, how did his peaceful second life explode into pure chaos? A fearless adventurer bursts onto the scene, slams into the monster to shield Itsuki from a deadly strike. Itsuki's heart skips, grateful and shocked at once, as he spots the adventurer's jaw-dropping look and can't help but wonder who this new ally really is. Itsuki finally runs into Hayato, another drifter who's been reborn in the same bizarre parallel world. Hayato throws out his name and Itsuki spills his reincarnation tale, and just like that, they click instantly. Itsuki stumbles onto a crew of women adventurers, and he's instantly blown away by how wildly different and irresistibly charming they all are. Several women eye Hayato with clear interest, hinting they might band together with him to form a strong, supportive party. With beautiful women all around him, Itsuki starts to finally embrace the wild, unexpected adventures and the sweet pleasures of his brand new life. Itsuki soaks up the chaos and comfort of his harem as they ride toward the city, and a wave of nostalgia for Japan hits him hard. They lean in and talk about Itsuki's rare skill, dying to see how it's going to save him in this brand new world. Itsuki proudly shows off how he's stacking pocket money every single day, earning it without ever having to work a day. The whole group bursts into surprised awe, instantly seeing how this skill fits perfectly with Itsuki's dreamy slow life goal. With confidence blazing, Itsuki steps into his new life, ready to dive headfirst into every challenge and savor every pleasure waiting ahead. Itsuki can't stop thinking about his next move. He's weighing what he can really pull off with his pocket money, his alchemy, and his agriculture skills. He decides to team up with a guild, lock in on alchemy training, and steer clear of stress and fights for the time being. The crew rolls into a buzzing town, and Itsuki feels the thrill of opportunity in the air. Itsuki can't stop admiring those daring women adventurers, and he daydreams about kicking back in a chill life, wrapped in beauty. Confident, Itsuki clings to his slow life dream, soaking up his second chance like it's finally his time to shine. Itsuki steps into this fresh life with hope blazing in his chest, ready to prove it, because his parallel universe adventure is just getting started. Itsuki burst into town, devouring skewered beef as he hunted for the alchemy guild with Hayato's map clenched in his hand. As he walked, something yanked at his back. He spun around and found a tiny figure staring back at him. A shy, cat-eared girl hung there in silence, and when Itsuki offered her beef, his eyes flicked to the collar dangling from around her neck. Someone snapped at him and told him straight she was a slave. Itsuki just stared, stunned that a kid her age could be trapped in a life like that. The slave trader Yasus stepped forward and, thinking Itsuki's worry was desire, tried to sell the girl to him on the spot. Itsuki caught the slave trader's attention by firing off random gestures, and in that split second, the girl shoved the beef into her mouth. With a bright smile on her face, Itsuki scarfed her food, waved at the trader, and slipped out of sight before he even clocked what she'd done. He finally burst into the alchemy guild, rereading Hayato's letter like it was a lifeline, then braced himself to meet the guild master. Itsuki inched through the door, half suspecting what would happen next, and called out his arrival like he needed the room to know he was there. An old woman suddenly stepped in, grumbling about his loud mouth, and when she finally showed her face, it hit sharp-eyed guildmaster. An old woman glared like a warning sign, grilling Itsuki for what he needed. No kindness in her eyes at all. Nervously, Itsuki introduced himself and blurted out his goal, pointing to Hayato's letter to take the edge off the tension. When she heard Hayato's name, her voice dropped to a hiss about drifters climbing up too fast, and that told it all. He'd become a noble through some shady, unknown way. She thrust an envelope into his hands, and boom, magic flared so hard it startled Itsuki and ignited his hand with light. The courtroom drama wrapped up the moment she flashed his guild card. Hayato trusted him enough to knock out the exams entirely. Itsuki begged for alchemy lessons, and the old woman muttered to herself over and over, "Beautiful Reinrich." Caught under her piercing stare, Itsuki snapped into panic, blurted an apology, begged for a chance to learn, and after a wary pause, she finally got cautious approval. Reinrich stared him down, then nodded at his potential and asked him to watch her work in total silence. She showed him the basics of mixing medicine, handed him the tools, and told him to follow her instructions to the letter. Reinrich said casting magic gets it done faster, but he warned that putting in the hard, manual work is what sharpens your skill and makes the potions taste better. Reinrich told Itsuki straight up, if he wanted to master alchemy, he couldn't just memorize it. He had to grind through the practice again and again with his own hands. As Reinrich tried to mix his potions, he slammed the brakes on every mistake, then guided him with relentless focus and razor-sharp precision. Itsuki kept hammering away at his training, tossing in magic now and then, fighting to stay focused, while Reinrich kept snapping his posture and technique into place without letting up. Slumped and spent on the floor, Itsuki could barely lift his head. Yet Reinrich still beamed and praised the first potions he'd managed to get right. Reinrich shouted for food, barking at her assistant Rit to feed the boy, who had zero fight left in him. Rito brought out the food and tea, and as Itsuki tore into his meal, Reinrich snapped at him for his lousy manners. As Reinrich sipped his tea, he praised Itsuki's talent to the heavens, and then calmly told him to start working under her. Itsuki grimaced at the taste, but his shot landed badly too, so Reinrich nailed him with a blunt comment about his reaction. Reinrich opened his home to him, telling him to start selling potions and, at least for now, hold off on paying. As night swallowed the sky, she asked if he needed money. He went bright red and confessed he absolutely did. A thief tore through the bustling market, clutching a stolen wallet while the crowd screamed, "Help." Blade in hand, he snarled that anyone who crossed his path would die, and the whole street erupted into panic. Right up ahead, a calm, cat-eared warrior clocked him, then darted into motion before anyone else even had time to blink. The thief burst forward for the grab, but she shut him down instantly, blocking every move and igniting his fury as he spat out curses. Suddenly, the thief slammed back with full force, driving a brutal hit that sent her crashing to the ground in sharp, painful agony. Sort roared with pride as Aina stood rock steady, ending the thief's escape with one brutal, final strike. Aina knelt by the thief, her worry flickering, then Sort leaned in and told her he was still breathing. The townspeople clocked Aina and Sort from Red Line the moment they arrived, and instantly they were bombarded with grateful cheers, thanks, admiration, the whole crowd having their moment. Reinrich and Itsuki spotted the crowd swelling, and Itsuki snapped out instructions to the Adventurers Guild before she bolted off. Right outside the guild doors, Itsuki's nerves raged, but hope burned brighter, telling him his brand new life had finally kicked off. Beneath the same moon as Hayato, Itsuki finally let his guard down and relaxed, completely blind to the fact that tomorrow would flip his whole world upside down again. Hayato slipped up to Reinrich in secret, begging her to hand Itsuki a gift as a thank you. Itsuki stepped into a shady inn and immediately got hit with icy stares and dangerous men, every one of them sizing him up like trouble. Feeling the crowd's energy turn hostile, Itsuki tiptoed forward, clocking fast that this wasn't the kind of place where you could do business in peace. A bright, cheerful girl behind the counter spotted him, and Itsuki instantly felt she could be someone he'd actually trust. Itsuki asked to sell potions and trade for ore, and the girl just nodded and agreed on the spot. No hesitation, no questions, like she already knew. The moment they clocked him, tensions snapped into place. People started accusing him of price gouging and drilling him again about whether his potions were even worth a damn. Ferris calmly pointed out that the potions were cheap knockoffs, yet everyone's gaze snapped right back to Itsuki like a magnet. A random guy cut in like it was nothing, but his sudden shift startled Itsuki. Every single potion bottle went flying off the table and shattered the moment. Horrified, Itsuki stood frozen as the bottles hit the ground and exploded, unleashing a screaming swarm of summoned insect-like creatures. Gutted and laughing behind him, Itsuki got singled out, accused of being tied to the pharmaceutical guild and hawking forbidden potions. Rienrich praised Itsuki's potions, and right then the bald man sneered, grabbed his hair, and shut him down. Cornered and blazing with rage, Itsuki clenched his fist and braced to fight for his pride, no matter how impossible it looked. Furious over the shattered potions, Itsuki swung recklessly, then a sharp voice snapped his punch to a stop in midair. Aina, the armored knight, snapped up her guard and stopped Itsuki's strike with effortless force, right between him and certain disaster. Aina snapped out with a razor-sharp voice, and the moment she did, both Itsuki and the thugs went dead still. Before Itsuki could even speak, Sort, this sharp-eared warrior girl, snapped at him and warned, "Calm down," like a blade cutting through the noise. Aina and Sort stepped forward in full armor, introducing themselves as the Red Front's notorious heavy hitters, two names everyone feared. The whole group went tense in an instant. Aina had confirmed she was there yesterday, and Itsuki started doubting their accusations second by second. From the lesser-known alchemy guild, Itsuki lifted his chin and proudly declared he'd always admired Aina's stunning beauty and her fierce armor. Itsuki thrust out his guild card, and the crowd instantly went stone-cold quiet, while Aina and Sort stepped in front of him like guards. Aina called it all a misunderstanding, and the bald man snapped into panic, then grudgingly apologized so he wouldn't cause any more trouble. Sort berated Itsuki with sharp fury, and Itsuki shot back, blaming the bad communication and the damage to his potions. Ine shut the argument down, offered compensation, and asked, soft but sincere, for forgiveness for her whole team. Rienrich, the furious leader of Purgil, stormed in and accused them of wrecking her product, then refused to let any apology slide. Rienrich roared for the guildmaster to come out, saying she'd only speak once official authority was standing there. Even with guilt chewing at him, Itsuki still let himself breathe. Rienrich stepped in and made it clear. This blame wasn't his, not after he was the one who'd chosen to try. With razor-sharp words, Rienrich cut the Alchemy Guild off from the offenders, snapping the crowd to attention in an instant. Panic detonated in the crowd as the bald man dropped to his knees and begged for mercy, because he just realized they'd be forced to pay a fortune for overpriced potions from now on. Rienrich snapped at Aina to her face, demanding justice for the students whose hard work got wrecked, his rage burning because passion had been met with pure carelessness. Rienrich ripped out Hayato's letter, and the whole guild went silent, because the hero just threw his support behind him. Hayato, the legendary dragon slayer, was officially confirmed as Itsuki's supporter, and the crowd went speechless at that shockingly perfect connection. Scared of the backlash, the guild forked over 1 million NAR and banished the adventurers who caused it. Ryan tore back into the question of her payment's sincerity, convinced she was hiding something, while everyone else just stood there, stunned. Sort erupted over the massive nominal, while Rienrich defended Itsuki tooth and nail, shouting Hayato's name like it was the final authority. Staring down that insane price tag, Ine stepped forward with iron resolve and promised she'd take the full blame herself. Tears welled up in Aina's eyes as she declared, "I'll become a slave to pay it back," and the whole room froze in stunned silence. Aina stepped forward and offered herself as a slave, dead set on crushing the debt that was tearing at her honor and pride. A shockwave slammed through the guild. Itsuki and the bald man froze in place as silence swallowed every single question in their heads. Renric marched up to her, shaken and frantic, grilling her about that sacrifice and demanding a clear answer for everything. The thug begged for another way out, but her iron resolve rattled the guild to the core, threatening their shaky reputation and hard-earned place in the world. Even when Ferris protested, she dug in her heels, because saving the guild's future meant giving up her own freedom. Aina soothed Ferris with a gentle touch, even as doubt clawed at her from all sides, and Itsuki snapped, calling out Rienrich for letting this happen. Sword erupted in fury, slamming the door on the claim that broken potions could ever justify Aina's choice to be enslaved. Aina stood her ground and snapped at Sorte, reminding him she'd sworn to shoulder it all, no matter what it cost her. She boldly crowned herself a knight, swearing she'd guard others no matter what, because even if the adventurers vanished tomorrow, she'd still stand watch. Ine stood trembling before the alchemist and begged for forgiveness, but a furious Rienrich shut her down and refused to back her plan. Itsuki jolted with panic, clinging to the piece from his dream, then chaos snapped into place, giants brought trouble, and now slavery is waiting for him. As his thoughts spun out of control, he imagined Aina trapped as a slave, crushed by the fallout and drowning in social chaos. Itsuki snapped back to reality, slammed the door on everything, and refused her offer. He wouldn't let it drag on. Worn out and shaking, he snapped that slavery helped nobody, and the whole room went dead silent as eyes slid from emotion to cold, sharp logic. Itsuki blurted out his thanks and refused her sacrifice, because she saved him just so he'd never let her be enslaved. Itsuki blurted out the truth, then shut down the idea that Hayato's involvement changed a thing, because he stood firm in his choice, with no obligation weighing him down and not a shred of regret. He flashed a confident smile at Aina, swore everything was fine, and promised he'd remake the potions she thought were ruined. Aina fought back, insisting she mattered, but he snapped right back, drawing a hard line and refusing to let her beauty be turned into someone else's chains. Aina froze on the spot, totally thrown by his words, while Sort let out a protective growl, and the whole room churned with shifting emotions around her. Rienrich's curiosity lit up, and he pitched Aina for labor. Her position made the idea dangerously tempting to everyone who heard it. Rienrich dared Dinah to prove she wasn't just talk. If she wanted to stay, she'd have to claw her way to real respect. Aina and Sort stood in tense silence as Rienrich stormed off, and Itsuki followed right behind, uneasy but still not about to back down. That night, Itsuki crumpled from sheer exhaustion, and his thoughts kept replaying every last moment. Was this really what home felt like? As sleep crashed over him, dreams ignited. Tomorrow's promise loomed ahead, and peace, duty, and maybe even a future with her burned in his mind. He jolted awake in pure shock, crushed beneath Aina, heat still lingering as everything blurred, half awkward, half dangerously intimate. Itsuki jerked awake, frozen in shock as Aina lay sprawled on top of him, way too close for a peaceful early morning. He stumbled back, totally lost and panicking, while Aina just stood there, still and unprotected, her sincerity hanging in the air like she meant every word. She spoke in a soft whisper, and Rienrich shut it down hard. This was a slave's duty, plain and simple. Her innocence still clashed, and the tension between them turned painfully awkward. Itsuki snapped in rage, blaming Rienrich's twisted manipulation, and he begged Aina, please stop and get dressed, before the whole thing spiraled out of control. Blushing hard, Ine spun away and asked, is something wrong with me? And then doubt and dead silence slammed into the room. Ine's confidence cracked, and she blurted her doubts, mistaking Itsuki's panic for a rejection and labeling it as proof she wasn't good enough. Before Itsuki could even speak, Sort slammed in out of nowhere, and when she saw what was happening, she blurted out Aina's name in pure shock. Rage surged through Sort as he launched through the air, tearing toward Itsuki to punish him for what he thought was misconduct. Her flying kick hit like a sledgehammer, and Itsuki let out a sharp groan as the room instantly erupted into chaos. Calling him a beast, Sort swore he'd protect Aina, while Itsuki scrambled to fix the misunderstanding before it exploded. Itsuki got summoned by a goddess into a whole new world, got crushed by bullies, and then stumbled into terrifying monsters. Still healing, he stumbled on a wild sight, an armored girl who tried to sell herself into slavery. They sat down to eat and plotted their move. Right after lunch, they'd march straight to the slave trader. Aina lit up the room with title after title for Itsuki, so confident, so formal, and so wrong about slavery that everyone froze in shock. She dropped her race's marriage rule like it was nothing, and Itsuki froze, while the whole table went dead silent, stunned. Sort pushed to buy Aina's freedom, but she shut him down cold. She wanted his sincerity, and she was ready to pay for it with her own sacrifice. Itsuki cracked jokes about money to break the tension, but the awkward pressure between them still clung in the air. Aina stood her ground, and Sort clocked it. Her grit matched his, and decided to march beside her even with the danger staring them in the face. With fierce instincts on overdrive, Sort snapped at Itsuki to stay away from Aina, then swore he'd guard her himself, no exceptions. No matter what anyone said, Aina dug her heels in and reaffirmed her choice, still calling him my lord as they kept marching forward. Itsuki couldn't crack Aina's motives, he was in awe of her grit, but the way she moved still left him completely baffled. Meanwhile, the Adventurers Guild fell into a tense hush, haunted by the fear of losing one of their own. The air went thick the moment Ferris finally tried to speak, totally rattled by their own gloomy silence. Ferris snapped them back to it. Aina gave up her own standing for their home, so don't waste what she fought to protect. Inspired by her words, the guild dug in harder than ever, hell-bent on honoring Aina's selfless choice. Reinrich finally slipped back into the armor shop after months away, and the shopkeeper greeted her with the same warm, familiar smile. He grilled her about the rumored apprentice, and Reinrich tossed back a casual confirmation, while keeping her real thoughts locked behind a guarded look. Meanwhile, Itsuki stormed into a lavish estate, convinced he'd found a noble's home, totally clueless about what it was really built for. A gorgeous woman smiled at him warmly, apologized for making him wait, and confidently waved him deeper inside. When she spotted Reinrich's name, her smile bloomed, and she guided a flustered Itsuki forward, each step smooth, confident, and effortless. Itsuki, Sort, and Aina huddled inside, and the moment they stepped in, the lavish room hit them like a knockout, far more elegant than they ever dared to imagine. Lord Yasus burst in with flair, smiling as he greeted them warmly. Then he tipped his hat, praised Rinrik, and introduced himself as the company's representative. Yasus flashed a cocky grin while Itsuki fought to stay calm, drowning in tension, doubt, and the crushing closeness of Aina. Yasus stepped forward and introduced the girl with total confidence, but Itsuki's nerves hit him like a truck. He panicked, frozen on how to even respond to that painfully awkward moment. Wendy bowed with pure elegance, an impeccable creation forged by Yasus's legendary company. Itsuki couldn't even find words. He couldn't accept that someone as graceful as Wendy was being sold into slavery like that. Tension snapped and Itsuki demanded quick action, because he was squirming in agony, pinned tight between his armor and crushing discomfort. Yasus kicked off the evaluation, Anna stayed stone calm, and Sort spiraled into panic, totally lost about why they were treating her like she was just some piece of merchandise. Yasus laid out exactly what was weighing on Aina, and Sort, torn up inside but devoted to her heart, nodded and promised to shoulder the pain with her, step by step. Yasus laid out slavery's many forms, criminals, debtors, and more, and Itsuki hunched in and listened like every brutal detail was burning into his brain. Itsuki stayed silent as Yasus laid out the royal and tribal slaves, but when it came down to it, those people weren't anything special, they were just trapped in debt. With no more questions flying around, they nodded and pushed forward, yet the hallway ahead went eerily quiet, like something bad was waiting to pounce. Inside the room, Wendy grilled their skills, Aina answered with nothing but plain honesty, and Sort confessed he'd only ever done basic camping. Wendy flashed a soft smile, then hurried to strip off her clothes, while Aina and Sort snapped to a stop, frozen, not knowing what to do. Flustered but still obeying, Aina slowly peeled off her armor and Sort watched with bated breath, terrified he'd missed the moment and now didn't know if he should stop her. Sort and Aina swallowed their nerves and followed Wendy's orders, stepping into barely their outfits for the evaluation, standing still as she closed in, her face turning soft as she calmly checked their fitness and overall health. Wendy offered a warm smile, thanked them, and told them to turn around. Then the girls hesitated, shooting nervous looks back at her. Wendy studied Inae's posture and steady calm, then drilled home why a servant's speed and presence could make or break everything. She made it crystal clear, if a slave could push discipline and bend with change, that was what decided how much they were truly worth. The exam suddenly felt suffocating, Inae's clenched through it in silence, and nobody noticed her growing discomfort until the pressure finally snapped past what she could bear. Sort snapped into action, shoved Wendy back with pure fury, and her sharp, echoing shout ripped straight through the room's tension. Wendy flashed a slice of smirk, clocking that these girls wouldn't turn a single profit, and her interest instantly evaporated. The paperwork finally got stamped and sealed, and Itsuki nodded along to the deal in silence, while Wendy came back way later like nothing at all had just gone down. Aina and Sort just froze there, visibly rattled, and while Itsuki tried to ask what was going on, Sort snapped at him to stop asking. Lord Yeshu's pored over the reports. Aina and Sort crushed the combat tests, but they flopped hard on the daily tasks. Yasus laid out the results calmly, and it was clear. Both girls could fight when it counted, but neither brought the kind of bigger team utility their partners needed. Curious, Yasus pressed Sort to reveal his limits, then Wendy stepped in, saying the data on him was dead wrong because it didn't match her real age. Wendy made it clear that Sort was still growing as a beastkin, then Sort's face flushed with embarrassment and he snapped it off in a rage, shutting down that emotional conversation. Right away, Wendy grabbed Sort and forced an inspection while he kept laughing his head off. Then the whole moment turned painfully awkward, and Sort ended up flustered, helpless, and protesting with no way out. Wendy breaks down Sort's beastkin instincts, then reveals how her own body quirks make talking to humans awkward and even fighting through physical challenges. The final numbers slammed into place. Aina snatched 600,000 NAR and Sort shot in right after with 400,000. YASUS sent the word and called the circle. Every member surged in, hands meeting at the center as they forged their bonds. The second their hands met inside that glowing circle, runes ignited in midair, and the contract sealed their partnership with pure magic. A searing burn ripped through Itsuki's hand, then a glowing crest burned into his skin, declaring him their master. The contract got locked in. Wendy snapped it into place with one fierce rule. Slaves weren't allowed to lay a finger on their chosen master. Sort threw protocol out the window and launched a test strike. Before Itsuki could even blink, a brutal magic backlash snapped back instantly. The contract snaps to life and a brutal wave of pain crashes into Sort. She crumples to the ground, writhing in agony. Itsuki checked on her and she snapped in frustration, still dazed, while he stayed cool and warned her to back off before things turned violent. Sort snapped that she was a wolf, not a dog. Then Aina suddenly chuckled and the whole crew froze dead in their tracks. Aina's smile widened as the tension finally melted away. And even with their denials, Itsuki and Sort's constant bickering was screaming that they were growing closer. The group stormed out of the contract house, all those papers sealed and locked in. Now they were officially bound together for real. Aina snapped them back to their duty, report it. Itsuki hesitated, still lost on how guilds were supposed to work. Elsewhere, another group sat on edge. Hayato still hadn't come back, and unease crawled through the calm of the night camp. A young girl's stomach growled, so she tore into the camp's supplies, ignoring every warning about the emergency food stash. Letty's heart slammed as an elf strutted back from bathing, rambling about soup like it was nothing, while he was barely dressed. Letty scolded her, cheeks blazing with embarrassment, yet the elf just shrugged it off, totally baffled by human modesty and those strict social lines. As they hung there waiting, concern for Hayato kept growing, and the elf shot Letty a teasing grin, daring her to bathe too. While the hungry girl dreamed of meat, Letty snapped and chased the elf, screaming and running in frantic loops. Elsewhere, Hayato sat by himself, staring into the quiet woods, because deep in the trees, something unseen was watching him. Hayato sank beneath the stars, staring at his own hand like it betrayed him, and the night chilled harder than ever. Just then, another figure closed in, both of them blurting out, "How's Itsuki doing after that contract split?" Meanwhile, Itsuki was cheering his heart out inside the guild as adventurers swarmed him with big smiles, mugs up, roaring together like one loud family. With a grateful nod, Itsuki got ready to head out and an elder leaned in to tell him, "Give it everything you've got, lead your group strong." The adventurers bowed their heads and apologized with real sincerity, and thanks to Aina's influence, they stood together again, united, hopeful, and ready to move. The guildman lifted his cup in a farewell toast and reminded Itsuki, yeah, he was a drifter now, different from the rest, but still one of them. A careless remark lit the fuse. Sort exploded into a rant, fiercely defending Aina and smashing down every nasty assumption about her looks and her place. Itsuki shot to his feet, overwhelmed to the core, fed up with the constant pressure. He finally blurted out how brutal the group's whole dynamic had become. As Itsuki slid back with the others, Sort leaned in and murmured doubt, and Aina just froze, watching him in silence, torn up with questions and feelings she couldn't say out loud. Sort shot Aina a warning not to fall for his charm, then grumbled as he sipped from her mug. Sort sulked at the table and groaned like it hurt, while Aina just watched in silence, torn between scolding him or rushing in to comfort him. Aina scanned the room and her smile slowly crumbled into tense, thoughtful silence. After a beat, Ine let out a small, faint smile, like she was being simple or like she cared more than anyone realized. The tavern erupted in cheers. Itsuki grinned and declared the whole world wonderful, swearing he'd throw an epic party with his skill. With a grin blazing on his face, Itsuki kicked his ability on, then a coin plopped straight into his palm as he hollered pocket money. Itsuki showed off his skill to cheers and applause, but the money kept drying up and the harsh truth started sinking in fast. Strangers leaned in, utterly lost, while Itsuki kept dancing on, clueless to the worried looks and harsh stares from the crowd. The moon blazed over weary faces as the party died out in a sudden hush, empty bottles stacked, and every guest finally collapsed into sleep. Itsuki crumpled to the ground, surrounded by barrels and mugs, and even as his eyes went dark, he knew this fall was still part of the journey. He replayed every face he'd met, Aina, Sort, Hayato, like each one carved a permanent mark straight into his heart. Coin clutched in his fist, Itsuki grinned because his second life was finally here. Calm, simple, and all his. Itsuki burst into the tavern delivering potions, but the adventurers just sat around, no quests left because Red Front had swept them all away. Aina and Sort, the Red Front elites, swear allegiance to Itsuki, promising payback after a nasty potion mishap. Even trapped in servitude, Aina and Sort fought tooth and nail, hunting down rare alchemy materials to keep their duties alive. With their help, Itsuki's alchemy surged forward, his skills sharpened, his confidence rocketed, and the debt finally started to vanish. Every morning, Itsuki would call forth pocket money with a soft smile, his calm, slow life powered by loyalty, hard work, and magic. Itsuki sucked in a deep breath, snapped into his skill, and with one quick flick, the familiar coin flashed into his hand. His skill finally stopped acting like plain copper, and gold started to gleam like a coin just flipped to life in his hand. His pocket money shot up to level 2. Staring out the window, Itsuki clenched his fist and finally made up his mind. Today was his day. Even with big dreams of an easy life, he got slammed with busted potions, brutal mentors, and countless days locked in Reinarik's lab. Money in hand, he bolted into town, hunting comfort, kicking back for leisure, and chasing those sizzling pleasures he'd only ever fantasized about. All alone, Itsuki quietly tore into his food, rich now, but with no clue where he even wanted to go. Stranded without a map, Itsuki stumbled into Yasus and Wendy, friendly, familiar faces from the very local noble estate. Wendy, elegant and graceful, stepped up and introduced herself, and Itsuki froze, because her smile lit his morning like gold. While Itsuki was trying to explain his day off, he admitted he barely knew the city. Then Yasus showed up and offered him unexpected company. Yasus gave a thoughtful smile and picked Wendy as the guide, and Itsuki nodded along, totally clueless that this walk would flip his whole world. Wendy quietly stepped in and offered him a place to rest, her gentle kindness hiding the loyalty she'd been guarding in her heart. Flustered, Itsuki hurriedly denied any dissatisfaction. Yasus flashed a satisfied smile, and Wendy stepped forward with perfect poise, offering her service formally. Wendy and Itsuki hit the shops together, and she tried on new clothes, while Itsuki just froze, stunned, because he'd never done something like this with anyone before. Gasping, Itsuki picked outfits for both of them. Wendy's beauty left him breathless, yet he stayed respectful and cautious the whole time. Wendy vowed to treasure the gift, and even with his old clothes, Itsuki's heart somehow swelled with unexpected joy. Outside, Wendy reached out with care, and Itsuki froze, his overwhelm cracking as he realized he truly treasured her calming presence. Hand in hand, Wendy steered him out, and her warmth lit a spark of courage in him, freeing him to follow without fear. They sipped tea in the glow of a sunny window, and Itsuki grinned so wide it felt like the world paused just for him. This was the slow, perfect life finally paid in full. Laughing street performers ringed them in color as they strolled. Somehow the whole town felt brighter, and holding hands just came naturally. Wendy burst into laughter beside him, and Itsuki lit up with a huge grin, because in this world, happiness finally felt real. Right when peace finally settled in, a noble's voice cut through the street. Wendy's name thundered out like an order. Itsuki whipped around just as Wendy stalled. The man snapped out a barrage of questions, paranoid, jealous, and completely brushing off Wendy's unease. Darrell demanded answers with raging fury and clung like he owned the truth, but Itsuki stepped in like a shield, staying calm as she protected Wendy and made it clear she wasn't anyone's thing. Darrell, the noble's son, strutted around like royalty, showing off his status and his fortune, then boldly declared he had 120 million nar to buy her. He bellowed for Yasus, and Wendy stayed right by Itsuki while he froze at the number, stunned. Without a second thought, Itsuki yanked Wendy into his arms and declared loud and fearless that he'd protect her no matter what it cost. Status be damned. Darrell trembled with veins popping, his lips twitching as fury churned behind his eyes, while his servant hid, cowering at his back. After a brutal letdown of a hunt, Aina and Sort trudged back home, grimly knowing every single thing they'd gathered was for their master. Aina snapped from the chains of servitude, but even so, duty yanked her into the woods to gather herbs for her alchemist lord. Right in town, Wendy blindsided Itsuki with a sweet, affectionate gesture. Then he froze, scrambling to find his voice. Itsuki stayed ice calm, swatting away the shock like it was nothing. He said brutal workdays had toughened him up, leaving Wendy stunned and Deturral speechless. Rage erupted from the furious daughter as insults cracked and threats flew, but Itsuki and Wendy didn't flinch. They stood their ground, untouched by all that noble fury. Tensions detonated. Deidral and Itsuki both demanded Wendy, and the moment Wendy shook in the middle, the whole air sparked with emotion. Didero's furious, irrational rage sparked as he began to charge power, while Itsuki planted his feet, stunned for a split second but ready to meet whatever came next. Later, alone with her, Wendy leaned in and asked Itsuki in a soft, tense voice if he really meant to buy her freedom from servitude. Before Itsuki could even open his mouth, someone showed up and the air went tight. Wendy had no clue how to stop what was coming. Yasis burst in and caught Deturral right in the middle of his outburst. Everyone snapped their heads toward him, because this time, real authority finally took over and the chaos made sense. Yasis called out Deturral's bluff, pressing him hard. Was he really about to cough up that 130 million now? Deturral panicked as Yasis cleared things up. Wendy wasn't sold at all. She was only assigned as a temporary guide for the guest. Deturral thundered his father's name, then Yasis met the threat with ice-cold calm, totally unfazed by the political pressure or intimidation. Even with protests roaring, Deidral shoved his plea for more time again and again, while Yasis finally gave in, unwillingly, and right away a poisonous tension started simmering between all three of them. With a smug smirk, Yasis threw down a duel, Itsuki versus Deturral, to settle Wendy's fate for good. Wendy stood rigid, feeling the hostility in the air, while Yasis smirked in silence. Wendy clutched Itsuki tight, thrown off by the sudden confrontation. They barged into the Alchemist Guild to hunt for supplies. Aina greeted Rainrich with perfect manners, while Tired Sort yawned right beside her. Aina pressed for the Master Alchemist and Rainrich snapped his gaze back, confirming that Itsuki was inside, alone, hammering away at his work. Sort shoved the door open and Aina slipped in right behind him. Then they froze as Itsuki was buried in notes, totally oblivious to them standing there. They hauled in rare supplies and Itsuki's face lit up, shocked but damn grateful for what they'd done today, until Sort spotted something. Sort spotted bright accessories strewn across the table, and her eyes lit up with wild curiosity and pure, childlike excitement. Aina stared at the jewelry, demanding to know what it was for, and Itsuki froze with nerves, fumbling for an explanation about why it was even here in the first place. Sort's frustration detonated, her scream tore through the town, and Itsuki flinched instantly, already wishing he could rewind time. Sort finally cracked the truth wide open. Those accessories were Deturral's sons, a monster of power, pride, and cold cruelty. Sort snapped back with brutal words, but Itsuki kept his cool, quietly swallowing insult after insult until the sting finally hit. Aina stood up for Itsuki, and the tension finally melted the moment he admitted he'd already planned a city outing with Sort. Sort jolted with emotion, not sure what to feel, and Itsuki quickly apologized. Then Aina snapped the conversation right toward the upcoming event. Itsuki spilled the truth. This contest was a fundraiser to free Wendy, and he had to come up with 80 million NAR to make it happen. Sort's rage flared again, smashing everything in its path, yet Itsuki forced himself to endure the onslaught, while Aina fought tooth and nail to hold both sides back. After the storm settled, they nodded and stepped in. Itsuki demanded they grab the accessory materials, and Aina agreed at once, calm but unshakable. When their plans hit a wall and got delayed, Itsuki didn't sulk, he jumped straight into potion sales. Ine apologized, but Itsuki took the setback in stride, no hesitation, no complaints. Aina beamed at him, praising him warmly, and Sort, amped up and buzzing with energy, yanked her along to hunt for materials, refusing to back down. Somewhere else, Wendy sat alone and stewed in worry, staring at the coming threat like it was about to burst through the door. She told Itsuki he didn't need to help, but he just grinned anyway and pushed forward. He soothed Wendy with a gentle promise, and right then her fear crumbled into steady confidence. Together, they swore they'd take on whatever trial came next. Wendy, stuck in a storm of doubts, demanded to know what they were really after. while Yasis sensed her fear and pressed her gently toward the truth. Yasis didn't even flinch. He called it fortune, like a cold-blooded gamble, while Wendy froze in silence, swallowing the betrayal like it was poison. Yasis softly promised Wendy everything would get better, and she just sat there listening, quiet, shaken, not sure she could really trust him. Wendy finally spilled the truth. She wasn't just any slave, she was rare, and she had a choice, and she could feel Yasa's plan brewing to sell her. Itsuki confronted Daedral, stunned that someone had put him on the line as a wager without his consent. And right then, the game's stakes stopped being just a game and turned painfully personal. Later, Yasis casually peppered Wendy with, "How was your day?" and the unease in her chest only worsened as she replayed Daryl's sharp stare from earlier. Itsuki offered a gentle smile to steady her, and Wendy hesitated just a beat before giving the faintest nod, an uneasy alliance quietly snapping into place. Wendy snapped at Yasis about that brutal time limit, because the job was drowning them in stress, but he just stood there, disturbingly sure he'd pull it off. Her hesitation screamed doubt, and Yasis pressed on, forcing her to bet her faith on whether Itsuki's strength could survive impossible odds. Yasis swore to Itsuki she wouldn't be left behind, but even as he promised her, it reeked of manipulation, and Wendy had no real way to fight back. Meanwhile, Itsuki stayed up working deep into the night, convinced this challenge could end up changing things for both of them. Raineric told him to rest and watched every step of his recovery, while she quietly warned that Wendy and Sort had a few troubling details to share. Reinrich teased Itsuki about being young with a smug sip of tea, and when their little argument sparked, it melted the tension right after they'd tackled the serious stuff. As the tea hit the cup, Itsuki finally caved and admitted he doubted himself. He wanted his freedom, selling potions without the guild's chains. Reinrich replayed every word he'd said, then added, "Daedral," and told her it felt like these potions might not be a sure win after all. She spilled the truth. Daryl's weird look wasn't the real danger. The pig beside him was being controlled, and it belonged to a guild manager. Itsuki finally felt the brutal truth hit. Getting rich off potions was going to be insanely hard, so he let out a frustrated sigh, but deep down he knew. Reinrich finished her advice and urged Itsuki to look beyond potions. Then she fell quiet as the idea settled in her mind. Lost in thought, Itsuki suddenly got a message from Hayato. An old connection had resurfaced, and it felt like something big was coming, even if the reason wasn't clear. Hayato shot a plea through the screen, and Itsuki instantly felt it. This wasn't some small problem. Something dangerous was already ripping open nearby. A towering phoenix burst out of the smoke, and Hayato's whole party stood shoulder to shoulder, braced for whatever hit them next. The girl called down a whirlwind and blasted the enemies away, then another attacker lunged in close beside her, right as the whole group swung into a synchronized assault. The girl threw herself in front of her ally and blocked the charging beast, screaming for help as she blasted open the way to the supplies. The phoenix burst its blazing wings wide, power surging higher and higher until it slammed down and wiped out nearby attackers in an instant. After the clash, Itsuki lit up and praised everyone's grit, then swore he'd come back next time with dungeon ore. Hayato exploded into motion with laser focus, then flung a blazing blade that tore straight through the phoenix's shield. With his weapon already in hand, Hayato faced the phoenix down, grinning like this was exactly what he came for. Then the beast let out a brutal roar. Hayato checked the request on his guild card, and the girl erupted in cheers the second the smoke finally cleared from the battlefield. Back in the workshop, Itsuki couldn't stop staring at the guild card. Its real-time contacts felt like a magical phone in his hands. Even when his body screamed to stop, he forced himself back to work, honing tools and formulas in razor-quiet focus, grinding through exhaustion until everything clicked. Out hunting, Sort swept in fast as lightning. Aina opened her mouth to talk, but Sort kept his eyes locked on the prey. With the supplies in hand and the pressure finally gone, Aina's smile lit up her face. Sort nodded and said it was time to head home together. Aina gathered everything with laser focus, praying these supplies would let Itsuki forge priceless items back home. Sort spit out her frustration, furious that the item's power felt misused, like something vital got tossed aside and turned into nothing. Aina stayed ice-calm, sipping her tea while the fury kept rising, because the way she forgave so blindly while everyone else fumed drove everyone insane. Sora wrestled with her thoughts, fuming from Itsuki's antics but still unable to fully shut her eyes to the way he acted. Even with all her explosive outbursts, Sora refused to admit what she felt. She snapped at everyone's preferences just to bury her confusion and protect her pride. Still rattled, Sora forced a grin and squared her shoulders. She couldn't wait to drown Itsuki in tasks. Back home, chaos exploded. Richest shoved a suspicious potion at Itsuki and swore it would jolt a worn-out Itsuki back to life. Before he could even argue, the girls pinned him in place. Then Shiro grinned and called it a gift like she meant business, lethal enthusiasm and all. Itsuki blinked awake so slowly, everything was blurry, then felt his head cradled on something warm and he realized with a jolt it was a lap pillow. Still half asleep, he blinked as water was offered to him, and he couldn't believe he'd been resting on Aina's armored legs. Fatigue crushed Itsuki's will, so she brushed off her flustered protests and demanded they stay right there, comfortable, frozen in place, for even longer. Sora, cheeks blazing and furious, loomed over him and snapped that he'd better not try anything else on her kindness again. Itsuki snapped upright, startled by her reaction, utterly lost, right as Sora spun away with a dramatic, over-the-top pout. Itsuki finally got to his feet, demanding news about Aina while Sora berated him as a total idiot. Then Aina smiled softly at him and they served him a proper meal. Itsuki tore through every bite in seconds, and the moment his stomach finally filled, a wave of calm washed over him. He froze, staring at the crafted accessories, stunned they were made while the person was drugged, with absolutely no memory of it. Richest sized up the total price tag, $40 million, and made it brutal. Itsuki had just 5 days to cough up the $36 million or face the fallout. Supplies hit zero and the clock was screaming. Itsuki sat there, packed with anxiety, desperately hunting for one more way to make it work. While he sifted through the last scrap of ore, Itsuki suddenly froze, because when he looked at it, the rock began to vibrate like it was alive. Once a normal office worker, Itsuki Shinomiya snapped into an unpredictable ride through a bizarre alternate world. Even after constant setbacks and mental overload, he kept hammering away at new inventions, rebuilding them from shaky flashes of his old life like his future depended on it. Fueled by everything he'd learned and the hunger to make people feel good, he forged a tool built only to deliver pure pleasure. After burning through countless tries with pure grit, Itsuki finally nailed his ultimate invention, and he proudly dubbed it the Pink Rotor. Sora and Aina spotted the device, and before they could stop themselves, they pounced on Itsuki. "What are you holding?" Flustered and dodging the truth, Itsuki fumbled over how to describe the tool, while Sora leaned in like a detective and guessed it was made for massages. Sora teased Aina, daring her to test it, and while Aina hesitated, curiosity still tugged at her. When the device kicked on, Ina's face flushed hard, startled by the sudden, crushing physical surge. Ina couldn't rein it in, she trembled like crazy, overwhelmed as that vibrating tool dug into her skin. Hit with those brutal vibrations, Aina's body went numb, and the device's wild power pinned her in place before she could fight it. The feeling hit like a wave. Aina crumpled to the floor in pure euphoria, while Sora casually said it looked so damn relaxing. Aina whipped around to Sora and dared her to test it, but Sora snapped back, questioning what it was even meant to do, still totally unconvinced. Itsuki swallowed hard and nervously admitted it all started in his own world. Meanwhile, Sora just stared, eyes empty, quietly building up a fury she couldn't hide. Out of nowhere, Sora snatched her weapon and burned with rage. Then she snapped at Blunt if she could finally end Itsuki right now. Sora's glare pinned Itsuki in place, and when she tried to bolt out of the room, she snapped, angrily warning him to stop. Beneath the moonlight, Itsuki stared at his invention one more time, already plotting how to cash in fast and make a killing. He murmured Wendy's name, clinging to his promise, then darted around the district with shaky nerves, hunting for the next shopkeeper he could trust. A group closed in, grinning like they knew him, and he guessed they were just customers, never realizing he'd just become their next target. Before he could even blink, they surged forward. He stumbled, and the tension snapped tighter as their faces turned icy and unnervingly sharp. As Itsuki tried to flee, he stumbled mid-escape. Then those guys screamed about injuries that weren't real, demanding he fork over money for fake medical treatment. Trapped on all sides, Itsuki thrust out a potion, and when they acted shady, rage flared as he accused them of taking orders straight from Darryl. Stunned by the accusation, they swore it was all lies right before he bolted off in a panic, just as they failed to stop him again. He roared out of fake gold coins, distraction, and that moment of confusion let them sprint wild and far ahead. With weapons bared behind them, Itsuki flashed a cocky smirk and hit his pocket money skill at the exact right second. With a sword slicing toward Itsuki, a girl suddenly burst in and dropped the attacker instantly. No hesitation, just pure dominance. She landed in a smooth glide beneath the moon, turned back with fearless confidence, and murmured to a stunned Itsuki, "I made it." Under the cold moonlight, Itsuki froze solid when the cloaked girl stepped out, her fur glowing this unreal, pure white. He spotted her again, the same girl from the day he arrived, small and silent, chained up and sold like a slave. They ran into each other in town, grabbed a bite together, and right there she just said, "I'm Shiro." That night, hostile men surged in and blocked their way. Shiro stepped forward alone, no hesitation, no fear. Standing tall in the alley, Shiro declared herself Itsuki's shield, her face calm and her resolve unshakable. Shiro shot them a cold warning, "Touch Itsuki, and you're done for." No hesitation, no mercy. A thug charged in with reckless fury, and Shiro snapped aside with effortless precision. Her reflexes were so dialed in they felt downright unfair. She raised her weapon for the final blow, then Itsuki snapped into panic, begging for mercy before it all ended. Shiro followed the command, and in the same breath he left the attacker wrecked and nearly broken. Her strike was razor-fast, perfectly precise, and absolutely merciless. Shiro tore forward at the last remaining enemies, and the moment she launched, their surprise hit like lightning as she flew through the air. With the enemies wiped out, Shiro stood there victorious. Then the whole town gawked at her, stunned by how fearless and powerful she looked. Itsuki thanked her, and Shiro kept her voice steady as she broke down the mission. Yasus had ordered her to guard her new master. Confused, Itsuki blurts out about her home. Shiro steps in and snaps that Yasus was her old master, but Itsuki's the one who's in charge now. Even though Itsuki wasn't ready to take her home yet, Shiro didn't make a fuss. She accepted the delay and quietly tailed him, zero hesitation. Side by side, Shiro tightened his grip on his coat, trusting her completely, because this weird bond they just sparked already felt like something dangerous and real. Shiro lay curled up beside Itsuki, peaceful as can be, and the Lord couldn't hide how sweet that made her feel, while Itsuki awkwardly brushed it off like it meant nothing. In a hush-hush private room, Itsuki laid out his plan and promised big profits by selling a mysterious object. Yasui snorted at the price, claiming it was nowhere near worth that much, but Itsuki just stayed stone calm and stubbornly determined. Itsuki made it crystal clear he wasn't selling the item at all. He was selling the exclusive production and marketing rights for it. Yasus had his plan crystal clear. This pink rotor was a massage tool, and rights meant ownership, no games. Yasus leaned in with interest, and Itsuki, buzzing with excitement, demanded they hammer out the contract terms before anyone made the final call. Yasus hauled the brakes, no promise he'd come back, no guaranteed supplies, and that price was just way too outrageous. Itsuki shot back with full confidence, claiming he could pull together materials and lock in a steady supply if he just had a little help from the others. Shiro watched in silence and realized the hard truth. When you're dealing with someone you just met, earning trust is a mountain you've got to climb just to make a business proposal. To prove he meant it, Itsuki threw himself into the deal, offering to become Yasu's slave if the bargain blew up. Wendy's memories burst into view as Sayasai's warning hit Itsuki hard. His offer wasn't the kind you could shrug off. Yasus burst out laughing at the audacious proposal, then snapped the deal into place, straight up wiping the slavery clause off the contract. Yasus pushed for total ownership because with permanent rights in hand, there was no need for some symbolic contract between them. With a piercing glare, Yasus snapped at Itsuki. Betrayal will torch trust and shut down every future chance right now. When the talks finally wrapped up, Itsuki's nerves hit full throttle. He blurted out one last favor and somehow steered the whole conversation away from business for good. When morning finally broke, Itsuki slammed the rotors together and stumbled back from his work. So tired he could barely yawn, only to spot the sun already climbing into the sky. A drowsy Shiro stumbled into view. Yeah, they'd finally reached the guild, but she could barely stay on her feet. Even with sleep dragging at her eyelids, Shiro refused to give up. She fought to protect Itsuki while he was carried across the rough, cobbled road. Elsewhere, the boss ripped into his thugs for missing the stranger, and pure rage thundered through the hall. Didaril the noble shrugged off every warning because he was dead set on winning, so he's plotting sabotage, no matter the danger or the fallout. Didaril swore he'd get revenge, promising to kill anyone who dared lay a hand on Wendy, while Wendy just kept bathing in quiet peace. Wendy, all quiet and lost in her own thoughts, washed in silence and softly called Master. Next morning, at the Alchemist Guild, Itsuki showed up, only to find the duel date still hadn't been locked in. Locked in front of Dadaro, Itsuki stayed rock steady while the rival forced him to admit defeat before the fight even began. Itsuki shot off a bold summon, calling Dadaro in to end their dispute. Then Dadaro strutted in, acting like he owned the world, mocking him with pure arrogance. Unshaken, Itsuki fired off brutal insults at Dadaro while Sort and Aina hung back, practically vibrating with anticipation for the explosion to hit. Lord Yeshus called it early. He declared the winner between those two rivals with absolute, unshakable confidence. Itsuki slammed down towering stacks of money, 80 million in profit, and Dadaro just froze, stunned beyond disbelief. With his fist thrust sky high, Itsuki declared he'd won, fully, loudly, and for everyone to see, while Data got crushed in total humiliation publicly. Lord Yeshus sealed the result. Itsuki hit his target first, and Dadaro froze in total confusion, staring with his mouth hanging open. Yasus blasted the contest as over in a fury, and Errol roared back in denial, fighting tooth and nail to refuse his defeat. Broken and desperate, Dadaro shouted that Rick had been paid off by Itsuki, stabbing the air wildly as he scrambled for some excuse, anything to tear down the judgment. Rienrich coolly shoved a document into Dadaro's hands. Dadaro's eyes went wild with suspicion as panic hit. Then he snatched it up and demanded, "What is this?" It was official, payment confirmed for real. Rienrich paid a staggering 40 million straight for accessories through Itsuki's business. Rienrich slammed down the doubts and defended the valuation, praising Itsuki's alchemical genius, because the price was fair, not a wild overcharge. Errol panicked at once, convinced some nasty conspiracy was brewing, while Itsuki's eyes filled with tears, moved to the core by Rienrich's help. Yasus slapped down a royal seal in the contract, and with that official stamp, everyone knew the rest of the money was backed by royalty. The king rubber-stamped a strange invention called the pink rotor. Then it went on official sale for a jaw-dropping $40 million. With a cocky smirk, Itsuki slammed down his win because to him, losing wasn't even a possibility. It was survive or everything ends. Wendy calmly urged Adderall to swallow the outcome, but his loud refusals spiraled into desperate, irrational panic. Adderall demanded Wendy come back, but she dug in her heels and refused. No way she was returning to someone she never chose. Wendy swore her loyalty to Itsuki, her heart and her body were his, and Dataral had officially been cut out. Then bam, something massive slammed into the building, rattling everyone to the core and cutting the tense standoff off mid-breath. Crushed and humiliated, Dataral bolted off, cursing like a storm, convinced the whole world was teaming up to mock him and drag him down. Crackling with pressure, Dydral snapped an order for a brutal assault, and his thugs surged forward, ready to kill without a single pause. Rienrich let out a frustrated sigh at how reckless it all was, and Aina with Sort snapped into position, ready to slam into Darrell's incoming forces the moment they hit. Wendy trembled, but Itsuki steadied her with unshakable courage. She trusted him more than anything in the world. Aina swore she'd stand between Itsuki and danger, side by side with Sort, who snapped back that she wasn't a dog, fumed at the insult, and still stepped in anyway. Shiru, the lightning-fast cat warrior, burst in with a dramatic entrance, and with a grin full of confidence, she reminded everyone she was part two. Aina barreled forward with pure, ferocious resolve, and right on her heels, Sort and Shiro closed in fast, set to smash every attacker in their path. The trio barrels into Darrell's men, and steel meets brute force as blades swing and fists slam in a chaotic, explosive brawl. Shiro snapped in a razor-clean kick, Sort swatted the incoming blow aside, and Aina answered raw brute force with her perfectly trained steel. As Wendy watched the battle unfold, fear crawled up her spine, and Itsuki cut in that he didn't have the strength to fight, yet he stayed right by her side. Even while his body shook with weakness, Itsuki swore he'd never let go, because his true power was standing right there for Wendy. Itsuki gripped Wendy's hands like his life depended on it, and confessed he'd stay by her side no matter what. Tears blurred Wendy's vision as she spiraled back to everything she felt the moment she met Itsuki, her heart opening wide like it couldn't hold it in anymore. Dadarol, still blinded by rage, bellowed for blood, like even innocent lives didn't matter anymore. Aina and Sort wiped out the attackers, then coolly pressed their questions. What was Dadarol even trying to prove with that reckless escalation? Rienrich sneered at the noble father, blaming his stupid son, and Itsuki snapped back, demanding answers for the Red Front. With the wall blown to pieces, Darwin, the West District Supervisor, strode inside, his gaze unreadable and his presence impossible to ignore. Itsuki snapped his head up in total shock. Right in front of him stood the local district supervisor, Darwin himself. Darwin stood there in eerie silence beside that mysterious girl, and Itsuki couldn't shake one question. Why the heck was a guy like him traveling with her? Darrell jolted at Darwin's voice, and that intimidating father pressed forward, demanding answers and sizing up the whole conflict. Darwin blinked in shock at Dadarol's stiff formality. Then he couldn't help asking why his son wouldn't just call him Papa like normal. Itsuki just stared as Darwin blurted out that dad thing, totally baffled by how weirdly formal this man was. Even with all the jokes flying around, Darwin's aura hit like a wave. You couldn't ignore it, and unlike Yas's or Rienrich, his presence demanded instant respect. Daryl scrambled to explain himself, but Darwin shut him out completely. His eyes locked on one thing. This was all about Wendy. Darwin snapped at Dadarol without mercy. Losing is losing, and there are zero excuses. And once he was beaten, that verdict wouldn't be overturned. Darwin strode toward Itsuki, stunned yet on guard. Then Shiro snapped her sword up at once, barking that he better not take another step. Darwin shot sarcastic praise at Itsuki's allies, flat out calling them pawns, and Itsuki clung to his ground while that twisted tone made his skin crawl. Darwin begged for cooperation, but Itsuki couldn't stop Shiro from snapping. His drawn sword only cranked up the tension between them. Itsuki talked Shiro into backing off, and she reluctantly complied, but she still warned that if anything felt off, Darwin was in her sights. Darwin sprawled onto the sofa like he owned the place, a smug calm wrapping around him, while the mysterious girl stayed silent beside him, watching his every move. Everyone settled in for the discussion. Darwin leaned in, tracking every twist of what happened, while Yeshuz played perfect host and welcomed the guests with open warmth. Dadarol, bound and shamed, pleaded for mercy, but Darwin brushed off his excuses as nothing more than childish desperation. Errol fought back, begging his worth as a son, but Darwin shut him down cold, denying any blood tie and stabbing his shame even deeper. Darwin burned with fury and sarcasm, swearing real sons would never shame him, and he went straight for Adderall, daring to question why it should even exist. Darwin drilled the life lesson again. Mara nodded, cool and steady, and then the truth landed hard. Winners claw for every last inch, and losers swallow the loss and keep moving. Yasis raked Dadarol over the coals, calling out the slander, the assaults on the Alchemist Guild, and the way he broke the neutral diplomatic pacts that were supposed to keep peace. Darwin demanded compensation for the mental damage, and Yasis unfazed snapped for payment too, claiming Dadarol's violence left deep emotional scars. Yasis leans on Itsuki with cold cash talk, dragging up the fact that he's married right when the thought hits Itsuki and his mind recoils in disgust. Rienrich stays stone calm as she fires off demands for reparations, insists the wall get fixed, then almost casually declares she owns Darwin's bank. Darwin crumples in dismay after hearing her decision. While Itsuki doesn't so much as flinch, Myra just confirms it with total confidence. Darwin begs for mercy. Rienrich tosses out a compromise, shared control over the loans, and Itsuki weighs it carefully, still not shutting the door completely. Rienrich swings a threat that could expose Darwin's son's crimes, and Itsuki plays dumb, while Darwin gets steamrolled by the brutal leverage. Darwin bursts out in raw frustration, hauling the captured criminal up in his blame as the illegal dealings keep dragging him back into the same mess again and again. As Darwin slams a warning into him, brutal punishment and public humiliation from the church, Darrell's whole world tilts and pure panic takes over. Darwin scrambles to win back favor by offering his help, but Itsuki feels trapped, and Rinrik needles his nerves with a smug little jab. Shiro corners Darwin under deadly pressure, and Darwin can only stammer praise, because she's calm enough to kill him with zero effort. He also hypes up Wendy's kindness, then asks her to come over, pushing for her trust even though you can see her hesitation on her face. Itsuki steps in and shields Wendy from Darwin's cruel remarks, and Darwin smirks while touching her just to provoke him. Sparks fly and the tension between them detonates. Darwin puts Itsuki's resolve through the ringer, yet Itsuki holds his ground, refuses to bend, and won't let anyone else take his people from him. Itsuki boldly declares he's gonna live for the moment, while Darwin sneers that he won't make it. But Itsuki just shrugs and brushes off the danger like it's nothing. Itsuki shuts down reconciliation and demands that justice finally catch Darwin for what he did, only for Darwin to look deep and admit he's got real curiosity about his own origins. Darwin drops a marriage proposal to Mara as a peace offering, and Itsuki just stares, utterly stunned and totally lost. Mara swings into bold flirting with Itsuki, teasing him to the edge while her curiosity smolders. Then she dares him, asking if he can really live up to her. Overwhelmed, Itsuki fumbles through his words and awkwardly shuts down Mara's proposal, admitting with a humble shake of the head that he can't live up to her demanding standards. Itsuki leans in to ask for a favor, and Rienrich urges him to speak without holding back. Tell him exactly what you want, no filter. Instead of chasing riches or power, Itsuki slips into a calm pocket of peace, sipping tea and soaking up the quiet like it's a reward. Over tea, Rienrich notices his chaotic luck. Somehow, every mess turns into a win, and Itsuki points out the best part: all those perks he ended up getting. Reinhardt calls the bank a fair prize, while Itsuki shrugs it off, saying it's nothing flashy, just modest, cooperative pay. As Aina and Sort close in, Itsuki chuckles awkwardly, because it finally hits him. Darwin's been setting them up to get swindled from the very beginning. Rienrich hands Itsuki the job, and Itsuki nods without flinching. Then he slips out to meet Darwin's messenger, who's closing in. Strolling through town, Itsuki tries to play it cool and denies he's lucky. But the girl laughs and teases him, saying the surprise perks came way too easily to ignore. Map in hand, Itsuki pushes forward, and Aina and Sort fall in step beside him, their bond growing with every step. Guided by the map, Itsuki and the girls march right up to their target. Then a towering estate looms ahead like a monster waking up. At last, he reaches his destination, his very own home in this brand new fantasy world. At the doorstep, Itsuki freezes for a beat, while Aina can't stop admiring the place, and Sort stands there, quietly sizing up his house like it's already on trial. Stuck between answers, Itsuki fires back at Aina's comment, and Sort just laughs bitterly like, "I've seen worse places than this." Even though everyone's waiting, Itsuki drags his feet before stepping in. He straight up admits he's nervous, because he has no clue what's waiting inside that unfamiliar new home. It hits him, the memory of his first apartment's walls, and Itsuki can't help but stare at how far he's truly come since then. Even with doubt clawing at him, Itsuki swings the door open, slips inside, and keeps wrestling with his conflicted feelings. Wendy glides down the hallway in a formal outfit, her face rock steady as she's ready to step into her role. She beams at Itsuki and greets him warmly, catching him completely off guard, while her sincere smile makes his confusion spike. Wendy steps forward like she owns the moment, and Itsuki's thrown completely off guard, stunned that she's taken on her servant role so naturally. Right when Itsuki's heart bursts with joy, Darwin swoops in like he owns the moment, casually greeting him with a teasing smirk. Darwin leans in and reassures him every promise is real. After weeks of disbelief, he finally has to accept it. This lavish home is really his. The house comes loaded with top-tier furnishings, a proper bath, and even an alchemy lab, and Darwin offers it all as sweet compensation. Darwin storms out, leaving Itsuki in charge of the estate, and Itsuki bows with gratitude, then starts prepping for the visitor arriving tomorrow. Itsuki ushers the girls inside and gives them total freedom to roam, while Wendy wastes no time pouring tea and slipping right back into her loyal, devoted servant role. Wendy rounds everyone up for dinner. Itsuki starts teasing him about sleeping outside, and then, boom, his sudden burst of responsibility kicks in. Aina and Sort flop onto the bed and immediately test its comfort. Then their eyes go wide because it blows away every local option by a mile. Sort pulls Aina into joining her for a bath, and the two of them dash off together, giggling and chatting like they can barely contain their excitement. Meanwhile, Itsuki soaks alone in the hot, steamy bath, finally letting the tension he's been holding crack loose from his chest. He groans as he stretches, lost in memories of that brutal grind and the tiny pleasures from his old life, and that fancy, cushy luxury now feels totally unreal. While he washes up, curiosity sparks, then his mind races toward practical inventions, slips into thoughts of alchemy, and just when it's getting good, someone steps in. The moment he barges in out of nowhere, she stays cool and sincere, and offers to wash his back, snapping Itsuki into a stunned, frozen silence. Itsuki panics as Wendy glides up calmly and declares she's washing his back, leaving him frozen, stunned, and totally speechless. As the water spills in softly, Wendy suddenly offers to join the next bath, and Itsuki's face flames red as he stammers, completely lost on what to say. Wendy starts scrubbing his back, and Itsuki's pride panics. He's fighting off embarrassment like it's a wave, clinging to composure even as the awkward pressure crashes in. Wendy leaned in way too close and Itsuki jerked back, startled at that sudden closeness and the soft feel right in front of him. Wendy snaps at him to turn around and Itsuki's heart drops. He realizes she's about to scrub his front next. Wendy creeps up behind Itsuki and hugs him tight. His thoughts tumble into a panic as he worries he might swing his sword just from sheer excitement. Wendy finally blurts out her feelings, thanking the stars she gets to be his, and her soft, honest words slam Itsuki completely off guard. Their faces draw in, tension snapping tight with every second. Itsuki opens his mouth to speak, but emotion clamps down and steals his words. Just as they close in, Sort suddenly crashes through, furious at the delay, while Aina scrambles to calm her. Wendy's caught red-handed, and both Wendy and Itsuki freeze on the spot. Sort and Aina just stare them down in the thick, humid air while Itsuki's panic spikes. Trying to clear it up, but Sort rips into him with furious accusations of impropriety and disrespect. Sort crumples to the ground, sobbing that Aina now hates her, and the two storm off together, shoving Itsuki into shock as guilt claws at him. Itsuki tries to shut it all down, insisting nothing even happened. Then Aina snaps into view, turns toward Itsuki, Sort, and Wendy, and apologizes with total sincerity. Aina boldly claims they have to step in and help Itsuki, while Sort finally confesses she's the one who dumped the work on Wendy. As Aina strides forward, dead set on helping, Itsuki gets yanked out of his own bath in pure frustration. Inuz dramatically crashes onto the floor mid-move, leaving everyone stunned, worried, and unable to catch their breath at her sudden fall. Itsuki crumples over his ruined bath, and before things spiral again, Sort shoots into action, throwing himself in front of Aina as the chaos detonates all over once more. That night at Darwin's place, the guests scrambled to apologize for bothering the household, then mumbled their regret to Dadarul about the whole mess. Dharma sits in silence as Mira lays out Darul's disgrace and how it crushed their family's honor to the core. Even though Dharma agrees with her, the moment drags on. She snaps, calls Daedril stupid, and roars about how ungrateful he's been. Dharma leans in, hungry to meet the drifter behind it all, because his wild moves during the guild incident haven't gone unnoticed. Morning sunlight spilled across the quiet countryside, roasting the calm rooftops and casting a sharp, looming silhouette of the estate in the distance. Shiro crouched on the rooftop, ears flicking at every flap and chirp as the birds shot off into the sky. Curious and razor alert, Shiro padded down the hallway fast, sniffing the air like a tracker to make sure that familiar scent was really there. Pausing in front of the locked door, Shiro pressed close, held his breath for any sound, then peered in with sharp, quiet curiosity. Inside the room, Itsuki was out cold, fast asleep. Shiro slipped in quietly, her voice trembling as she called for her master with real worry. Itsuki muttered in his sleep, trapped in a nightmare that wouldn't let go, while Shiro just watched in silence, confused, worried, and on edge. Shiro softly patted Itsuki's head, drowning out his rambling nonsense as his body finally settled and his breathing slowed into calm. Sunlight spilled through the window and Shiro snapped her eyes up, blinking slowly as she felt morning finally roll in. Itsuki jolted upright and spotted Shiro passed out beside him. Then he leaned close and breathed her name so softly it barely made a sound. Wendy marched in with breakfast and Itsuki explained why Shiro was there. Then Wendy let out a long sigh, ruffled Shiro's hair, and muttered that she was nothing but trouble. Wendy tried to wake Shiro but stopped at the last second. Itsuki soothed her in a soft voice and decided to let Shiro sleep peacefully. Everyone squeezed into breakfast, staring at the feast laid out in front of them, until their eyes lit up with instant, unstoppable hunger. Wendy's cooking got them cheering and Sort's shoulders sank as defeat hit. She knew she couldn't match it, but she still kept her head down and quietly admired every bite. Even though Itsuki dug into the food like it was nothing, his total disaster of a table manners left Shiro frozen, speechless, staring as he ate like a wrecking ball. After they wrapped up, they thanked Wendy with warm smiles. Tea was poured right after, and that calm, peaceful morning routine finally came to an end. Itsuki was finally living in peace, and he dove into another lavish dinner. Wendy's cooking wrapped him in comfort and delivered daily happiness right there at the table. Next morning, the teasing started. Sort cracked jokes about Itsuki's neediness, and the way he said it made it sound like Wendy had officially turned him into her own fully domesticated pet. With fire in his voice, Itsuki raged about food's power, how flavor and anticipation turn every single meal into something unforgettable. His words hit Wendy like a wave, and suddenly she became the heart of the whole place, turning every meal into hope, unity, and strength. Wendy finally looked up and thanked Shiro for cleaning, and with that, calm swept over their home, because they'd both done their part. Cheryl watched Wendy closely and realized something was different. Her cooking had turned warmer, softer, and somehow packed with quiet affection. Huddled together, the group watched as Itsuki's nerves exploded. He steadied himself and prepared to thank them for standing by him. He pulled out small, heartfelt gifts, little thank you tokens for each of them, all for their help and their friendship. Touched by the gesture, Aina, Sort, Wendy, and Shiro finally accepted, and the smiles on their faces melted as they saw how truly Itsuki tried. Wendy vowed to cherish it, then, in a soft, shaky murmur, she told you it was okay, her face glowing with quiet joy. Itsuki begged them to stick around, but Sort slammed it down. Nope, their debt had to be settled the only way they knew, by going on an adventure. With bright, cheerful goodbyes, they split up. Ine shot a warning to stay safe while Itsuki frantically tried to soothe Sort's raging energy. Later, tension snapped back into the air. Everyone feared Range would stumble on their situation and wreck the truth about the bond they shared with Itsuki. Even with her nerves screaming, Sort strode forward with grit, swearing she'd give it everything, proud, focused, and ready to fight for her best. That afternoon, right under Yasu's watch, Itsuki hammered out a formal contract with Wendy and Shiro, locking their bond in place for real. With their hands locked and the words unleashed, the magical contract snapped into place, binding loyalty and sealing their shared fate forever. Yasus just laughed it off. Itsuki bowed an apology with a humble heart, and both of them looked genuinely grateful, because this time their whole futures were in someone else's hands. As dusk rolled in, Itsuki sat there stone still, and when Wendy called his name, she saw him staring out at the distant hills like they were hiding something. He admitted he was thinking about turning that open land into farmland, an idea so calm and satisfying it practically glowed. When he asked curiously, Itsuki smiled and answered on the spot, like the calm, peaceful world had lit a fresh spark in him and pushed him to start over. Itsuki carefully cradled Shiro in his arms and quietly swore he'd bring warmth, care, and peace to their lives. Wendy slipped in with them, and the moment she saw it, her heart melted, like a peaceful new family future was finally taking shape. Right as comfort finally settled in, a knock cracked the silence. Wendy peeked out, and suddenly strangers stood there, dragging a whole wave of tension with them. Dharma stepped in and introduced himself, straight alongside Mira, and the moment his words landed, they shattered Itsuki's calm like a sudden storm. Dharma strutted in, bragging like it was a victory speech, name-dropping every achievement and connection, while Itsuki sat there, clocking the pushy, way too confident vibe loud and clear. Later, Dharma rolled up to Itsuki's place with Mara and hit him with a heartfelt, formal thank you, plus a heavy apology for all the misunderstandings from the past. He swallowed his pride and apologized for the mess Daryl caused, admitting the fallout had blown up way worse than they ever imagined. Dharma tried to keep talking, but Itsuki shut it down cold, then walked away, refusing to drag that mess back up. With a smile locked on his face, Dharma judged Daryl quietly weighed his worth, wondering why anyone would pick such a disgraceful man for family. Dharma demanded another chance to thank Itsuki for Darwin's whole incident, and that razor-sincere tone made everyone go stiff with tension. Itsuki snapped, demanding he stop calling him young master, and Mara watched like a hawk as she warned him to stay sharp and keep his eyes open. Alert, Dharma blurted out his admiration for Itsuki, placing him third right behind his adoptive father, with wild passion and eyes shining like he meant it. Itsuki felt sick to his stomach, and Mara snapped that he was off limits, furious at Dharma's smile because behind it that charm was pushy as hell. Afterward, outside the house, Dharma strolled up and casually checked on Itsuki's comfort, like none of it ever happened. Itsuki stepped into the bath and praised it to the heavens, stunned to find out Dharma himself designed it, down to every thoughtful detail. Madara told them she'd taken Drifter's notes to heart, busted her tail, and pushed herself to finally meet Itsuki's expectations. As she guided the city, Itsuki clocked her calm poise, and his mind immediately raced over that strange adoption past. Dharma and Mara bowed and offered their support as they said goodbye, and Itsuki nodded back, quietly grateful for every bit of it. Shiro was wiped out and starving, clinging to Itsuki as he shot out an apology and promised dinner, because tonight, Wendy was already grilling. Dinner hit the table in a flash, and Itsuki, Shiro, and Wendy dove into every bite while laughter lit up the whole room. Afterward, Itsuki slumped into a chair beside Shiro, both completely stuffed after Wendy's hearty feast. Wendy set out the bath she'd prepared, but Shiro didn't hesitate for a second. He blurted that he had to join in, and Wendy swore she'd follow right after. As warm water poured over them, Itsuki carefully guided Shiro through a gentle wash, making sure she was spotless, calm, and comfy the whole time. Shiro sulked, but he still obeyed. Itsuki got her done washing, then guided her into the soak to warm up. Shiro joyfully paddled and splashed in the water, totally laughing off Itsuki's warnings as she swam without a care, despite being part cat. Wendy trotted over and asked how the bath felt, and Cairo melted into it, pure relaxation, purring with total, peaceful satisfaction. Wendy slipped in quietly, a calm smile on her face as she geared up to join them in the bath. Itsuki told Cairo to sink in up to her shoulders, and she only nodded lazily, letting the warm water wash over her like a slow, soothing victory. Wendy slipped in without a sound, and Hitsuki snapped around, startled. Then Wendy quietly started rinsing herself, slow and careful. Wendy slipped into the bath, and Itsuki whipped around, startled for a second, while she spoke to him in a soft, reassuring voice. With quiet grace, she stepped into the group. Shiro relaxed without a sound, and Itsuki made room for Wendy right beside him. Silence hung there for a breath, and Wendy snapped her gaze away, nervously rubbing her neck, completely unsure how to break the tension. Wendy swallowed her nerves and asked, quietly but boldly, if she could visit his room, her voice shaking while her eyes stayed locked and steady. Itsuki gave a soft, yeah, then leaned in close as the evening faded under that calm, moonlit sky. Mitsuki sat alone in his room, calm and still, until a knock shattered the quiet and he softly gave the go-ahead. Wendy slipped in softly, eyes down, and when she spoke, her voice shaking, she called out to him, desperate for a calm reassurance. Itsuki flashed Wendy a warm smile, accepted none of it, and told her, "Next time, I'll help you," like a promise sealed on the spot. Memories crashed back, his very first date from ages ago, fuzzy around the edges but sweetly painful, and it made the calm happiness he feels right now hit even harder. With the silence hanging between them, Wendy slipped her hands over his with quiet, careful gentleness. Wendy soothed him with steady words, reminding him of her role, while his heart fought back inside. Itsuki spun toward her and spoke from the heart. His feelings were real, and he'd already fallen hard for Wendy. Wendy hesitated, then finally blurted out her question, half terrified she'd misread everything and half praying her feelings were actually returned. At first she stayed silent, but then Wendy swallowed her fear, tightened her grip, and finally whispered her feelings like it was the bravest thing she'd ever done. With a trembling voice, she struggled to get the words out, confessing bit by bit, terrified she wouldn't know how to explain what was burning inside her. Memories crashed over her, every warm moment with him, and then, through tears, she finally dared to speak the truth with raw, heartfelt sincerity. Elsewhere, whispers slithered through the air as men size each other up, but Wendy already knew her master was softer at heart than anyone she'd ever met. Wendy clutched him tight and basically shut the whole status thing down. She didn't care anymore. She just wanted the comfort he gave her. Shaking with fear, she inched closer, chasing any warmth and comfort she could get, whispering for him to finally accept her. She breathed out her wish in a trembling whisper, begging him not because she had to, but because her heart ached to be truly his. Wendy lay close to him, stripped of defenses, and poured out her true feelings, handing him her whole self and trusting his heart more than any promise. Their bond grew stronger in a quiet, heartfelt embrace, until out of nowhere someone crashed into the moment. Shiro stumbled in, still half asleep, then froze when he realized Wendy was right there, inches from Itsuki in the dead of night. Itsuki panicked and blurted out shaky excuses, staring as Wendy just watched her blankly. Then Itsuki finally asked, "Are you okay, Wendy?" He snapped Shiro's focus onto him and shoved in quick help to distract her, while Wendy just stayed silent on the bed. Morning light filtered through the leaves, and Itsuki stood outside wide awake. He couldn't shut his eyes after everything that happened. Shiro spotted him drifting around, and she kept her voice soft, because Wendy had already dished out breakfast and the new day was finally roaring to life. At breakfast, Wendy's smile lit up the room as she pushed him another bowl of soup, and Itsuki took it gratefully, warmth settling in as he truly cherished her kind, gentle care. He announced he'd be heading to re-enrich. Wendy snapped her gaze aside, nerves buzzing, while Shiro just kept on eating like nothing could shake him. Right as he was about to head out, Wendy gently stopped him, worry trembling in her voice but masked with softness. He vowed to do better next time, gripping her hands tight with a silent promise and a steady, gentle strength. With a soft, warm smile, Wendy let him go, silently praying he'd come back safe from Rainridge. Itsuki strode out with pure confidence, a calm little smile tugging at his lips as he headed toward the silent streets of Rainridge. At the Alchemist Guild, he proudly laid out his hard-earned progress, and Rainridge stepped in to inspect it, eyes sharp, impressed by how steadily he was leveling up. While they were joking around, Ryan Rick teased him and blurted out if he was already sick of cute girls. Their conversation veered into every past screw-up. She laughed at his restraint and tore into his hesitation with playful, vicious delight. Reinrich let out a heavy, defeated sigh, then met her with a sharp, cold stare as she demanded point-blank that his education couldn't wait. Reinrich poured the drink like it was nothing, no hesitation at all. Itsuki balked, questioned him, and then, against his better judgment, grabbed the glass, took a cautious sip, and swallowed hard. She tore into him with brutal honesty, and Itsuki finally confessed his fears, only to end up hurting Wendy by acting on feelings he couldn't even trust. Reinrich preached the women's truths, insisting feelings always spill through, while Itsuki doubted her and got a harsher tort in return. Itsuki shot his glass into the air, calling for a wild night. Then Rinrich snapped that she wouldn't lift a finger to clean up his mess. Later, he crashed out drunk. The innkeeper grinned, wished him a good night, and watched him snore away in peaceful silence. Rhian'er snatched him out of mid-fall, muttering under her breath as she steadied his drunken body with a heavy sigh. That night, she watched him sleep like an angelic guard, and with every quiet breath, Wendy's fate crushed her, trapped in a devotion so still it almost felt like a cage. The mansion shook with a violent roar. Wendy flashed a dark smile, and Itsuki froze on the spot, terrified of what was about to happen. He cracked the door open, and Wendy practically pounced into the room. She beamed at him, all smiles even with his painfully awkward return. Wendy poured the tea with a sweet smile, and Itsuki took a quiet sip, too careful, too tense, dodging Shiro's gaze as the tension in the room kept tightening. Itsuki remembered his promise and shot back with an apology. He swore he'd set everything right, even as guilt crushed him. Wendy's words tried to calm him, but that hollow smile screamed pain, and Itsuki knew his mistake still hadn't been forgiven. Wendy trudged alone down the street, hugging that stray like it was her last lifeline, her voice barely above a whisper. She'd waited for him, but he never showed up. Itsuki stared at the sky, drowning in guilt, and that crushing sadness kept replaying in his mind, over and over, with no escape. Memories crashed in, brutal words flew, and promises shattered. Then it hit him hard. He'd been hurting people long before Wendy, not just her. He snapped upright, locked in his thoughts. No matter how they shut him down, he'd still apologize straight to their faces, with the truth staring back. Wendy slid closer without a sound. Itsuki snapped his eyes up. She asked softly, and he just nodded, his chest heavy, praying she still felt the same. Sitting in uneasy silence, Itsuki froze, his words jammed in his throat, while Wendy just sat close, waiting quietly. He rose to his feet, bowed low, and poured out a heartfelt apology. His voice shattered, but the truth in it struck Wendy's heart like lightning. With his eyes cast down, Itsuki finally admitted he'd messed up. He knew he'd shattered her trust, and that pain crushed him to the bone. Wendy let out a breath, wearing a barely there smile. Her voice turned gentle as she forgave him, but she still warned him just this once. She gripped his shirt hard and pleaded, "Don't leave me again," and Itsuki nodded. This time, he actually listened. After that gut punch moment, Wendy whipped up lunch, and Itsuki casually tossed Kairo an invite. Join him later outside. While they cleaned up, Shiro leaned in with curiosity, and with Hitsuki clutching the dishes, he hinted he had something new he desperately wanted to try. They all huddled outside, and Itsuki, sick of being shielded for too long, decided it was time to switch things up, pulling out a weird spinning device. Wendy sucked in a breath, stunned. Itsuki grinned and called it space magic. Then she blurted, "So what is that your special skill?" He spoke in a calm voice and finally admitted the truth. He was gifted by the goddess. He'd leveled up recently, and that backup plan they once ignored, it's being tested right now. Itsuki slammed on spatial magic, and a glowing shield erupted around him, sealing his body in shimmering protection. Buzzing with excitement, he told me that the transparent wall was something he built himself, and then he demanded to know if it could truly keep him safe. He ordered Shiro to try it, and she raised her weapon at once, hesitating for half a heartbeat but fully trusting his word. With a sharp cry, Shiro exploded forward. Her first punch landed with a thunderous impact, but the wall didn't budge. He kept pushing her to go on, and she kept hammering the wall with strike after strike. He watched with shaking urgency, stunned as it refused to break. Itsuki, itching to understand magical resistance, cornered Wendy and asked her straight up. She jumped in without hesitation and started walking him through what she knew about spells. Wendy glided forward with magic whirling around her, and when Itsuki saw the signal, he braced behind the barrier, ready to strike. She flicked a water bullet with zero hesitation. It slammed into his shield, and he braced hard just in time as the wall held steady. With gratitude buzzing in his chest, Itsuki pitched a trip into town, and Shiro practically exploded with excitement, ready to dive into food and have a blast. Suddenly, everything erupted into chaos. Sort and Aina sprinted after a rampaging beast through the forest, weapons out and primed to strike. Aina surged forward with pinpoint precision, slicing into the beast with her blade as zero hesitation showed in every ounce of her strength and poise. Sort wiped the sweat from her brow and gulped in air, while monster corpses sprawled all around her, ready to move but frozen until the hunt finally finished. Later, by the crackling fire, Sort sipped his stew while Aina stirred the pot in gentle, quiet circles, her voice soft as the flames. Sort reassured Aina that simple meals would be enough, but Aina hesitated, then finally confessed her fear that she'd never be able to impress the people she idolized. Aina blurted out her doubts. She wanted to prove herself again, because the thought of Renji judging her felt straight up unbearable. At the city's second wall, a young girl screamed at the top of her lungs, her voice ricocheting through the stones as pure desperation drove her to break through. Guards slammed in front of her and cut off her escape. No matter how hard she begged, they stood firm and said they'd been ordered to keep her from crossing. Fists locked tight, her voice trembling as she blurted the truth. No coin, no bribe, just raw urgency and empty hands shaking with hope. Ranger sprinted to the checkpoint, her tail whipping side to side, and she demanded entry even as the guard's hesitation showed plain as day. Renji snapped into a low growl, sensing danger snapping shut from behind as her instincts screamed that something was coming fast. One guard spun around, bewildered, then a sudden blur tore through his sight and he froze, wordless. Before he even had a chance to react, Renji ripped into him with a vicious spinning kick, sending him flying back while she kept moving like nothing happened. She burst inside and slammed the gate shut behind her, while the other guard roared and blew his whistle. Reng barreled through the town gates, yelling that she'd help, before anyone else could get hurt. Meanwhile, a living potato-shaped creature bounced through the market, scrambling locals' brains and snaring every curious stare in the crowd. Itsuki crept up on the strange creature, and as Wendy explained, it was a moa, a hopping vegetable species. He couldn't help but stare. Stunned, Itsuki realized vegetables were actually walking around here, nothing like back home, where only fish ever moved. Shiro lunged and grabbed him out of nowhere, begging for food even as he kept chomping down that living vegetable like it was nothing. Shiro shrieked for meat and Itsuki chuckled softly, swearing she'd get a full hearty meal. Wendy beamed at Itsuki's request and boldly promised to lead them straight to the town's best spot. They strolled side by side. Shiro skipped along behind them with pure joy, while Wendy held Itsuki's hand tight, smiling like it meant everything. Later, the three tore into a gigantic feast side by side, laughter roaring as Shiro shoved down meat with pure hungry joy. Under the moon's cold glow, distant guards kept prowling, still closing in on the intruder who'd slipped through earlier. Ring sprinted across the rooftops under the moonlight, teeth clenched as the guard hunted him without letting up all night. She shot into the sky, blasted straight through a wall, and slammed down right next to a stunned man. Meanwhile, Shiro found herself boxed in by guards. She lifted her weapon high as their loud commands blasted through the air, ordering her to freeze. Renji yanked Itsuki into her grip as a hostage, snarling for everyone to freeze while she demanded a safe passage. She begged Wendy to trust her, swearing she only needed a little help, just long enough to protect her friends. Wendy burst into tears as Shiro froze in place, ripped between his master's command and the desperate urge to move. Itsuki was hurt but grinning as he shoved Shiro to protect Wendy, then the guards slammed in from behind. Renji clocked the shift in the moment, then motioned Itsuki to bolt straight through the alley up ahead with her. Itsuki blasted on his space magic, pouring in power as he sprinted through the cramped back alleys with Renji hot on his heels. A savage spell exploded behind them, smashing the wall to rubble while they bolted deeper into the shadows and disappeared. A thunderous slam exploded into the chase as Rang smashed a guard, ripping open the path in front of him. Itsuki blurted out an apology fast, while chaos erupted and swallowed the confused soldiers in that tight corridor. Renji and Suki bolted without a second thought, sprinting forward hard before the guards could trap them again. Wendy shouted down from above, begging Shiro to stay put and guard Itsuki with her life. Shiro gave a silent nod, sprang into the moonlit sky, and accepted her new mission with fierce, unshakable resolve. The hostesses beamed and waved the guests off, their bright charm hiding the storm brewing backstage. A fresh hostess ushered them in, her calm voice hiding a sharp curiosity as she set their table. Renji's nerves snapped tight as she questioned Itsuki's choice to duck into what looked, no doubt, like a brothel. Itsuki found out Rang had slipped past a toll with no money to pay, and that bombshell instantly made everything worse for her. While Renji insisted her friends were in danger, the hostess calmly leaned in and asked for her name and her story. Itsuki pulled out Sort's letter and snapped, "Aina and Sort got nabbed by a pervert." The letter laid out brutal abuse in shocking detail, and Itsuki's stomach dropped as horror and rage surged through him while he read every word. Renji totally misread what the letter was really saying, but he was still fired up to rescue her friends, while Itsuki kept trying, steady and calm, to set him straight. Right as a hostess spotted Itsuki, she gasped this was the rumored master behind the red front. Rang Shui snapped around at him, startled out of her skin. Rang suddenly slammed into Itsuki and fury lit her up. She was convinced he tricked everyone and grabbed control the wrong way. Rumors tore through the land. Aina and Sort got branded as his slaves, sending adventurers into a spiral of suspicion and terrified fear. Months before all hell broke loose at the Adventurers Guild, a mystery figure slid up to Red Front and dropped a quest on them, quietly, like it was meant to change everything. Renger's name kept popping up on nomination lists, and people couldn't stop asking why his name showed up so often. An urgent mission tied to an earth dragon slammed down, so Rengsh bolted forward, refusing to let anyone else handle it, and vowed she'd fix it herself. Even with everyone warning her that she'd mess up, Rengji brushed it off, swore the mission was a piece of cake, and took it on by herself with zero hesitation. With a proud grin, Wrench promised she'd warm up, stretch her legs first, before she tackled the job waiting for her. The moment she hit Rukaku, heat slammed into her and exhaustion nearly crushed her, but she clenched her resolve and pushed on toward her destination. Wrench strolled down the streets she knew by heart, grumbling about the brutal heat as her tail flicked, while the locals carried on with their everyday lives. Right then, the kids swarmed her, eyes lighting up the moment they saw Wrench, cheering at the top of their lungs and gently tugging her arm like they couldn't believe she was there. Wrench beamed at the kids, and the moment she spotted Shama's arm, her smile vanished. She pressed her with worried questions about the injury. Shama broke the silence with a heartbreaking truth. While they were traveling, an earth dragon attack slammed into them, injuring his father and tearing their family apart from the inside. Ranga, swamped with responsibility, thrust a pouch into Shama's hands and demanded he take it straight to his father. She smiled softly and told me it was finally time to repay that old favor, only she'd been sitting on it for years. Right before she left, she laughed about how hungry she was, then sweetly asked them to pass her regards to their father. Renya called out to the kids and pulled them into her meal, and just like that, a cozy wave of joy swept over them. Everyone was grinning. As the sun dipped low, Range hurried straight for the Rukaku Adventurers Guild to file his report. The old guildmaster greeted her warmly and told her the hard truth. Most of the guild was gone, swallowed up by the recent dragon attacks. He remembered when the Earth Dragon finally broke free, and how every brave adventurer's best moves crumbled, because normal weapons couldn't even scratch its ruthless scales or stand up to its savage strength. 3 dragons vanished like phantoms, burrowing under the sand, and the last anyone saw them was 5 days ago near a southern oasis. Rangi slipped out solo in disguise, clocking that the ambush was a total gamble, especially if Sword had shown up instead. Right then, the ground under the dummy slammed and shuddered. Then a colossal dragon erupted upward in a brutal surprise attack. After 3 long days of watchful tracking, Renge finally caught sight of one, and snapped her mechanical weapon into battle mode. With confidence blazing and fury roaring, she stared down the dragon, screamed threats, and charged in like she was there to unleash divine punishment. That night back home, Aina casually told Sort the bath was free, totally clueless that Renge was just moments away from going all out in a brutal fight. Back home, Sort grabbed a pen and started writing Renge a letter, her heart full of worry as she wondered if Renge was really okay. Beneath a blazing full moon, Renge slammed into the earth dragon in a brutal clash, throwing every ounce of raw strength while her razor-sharp instincts drove the fight. Even with that heavy armor on, Renge still took a brutal hit and snapped a curse, because this monster was way faster than she'd ever guessed. The dragon's spinning tail slammed into the hard brace with a brutal crack, and it grumbled that its body was every bit as tough as predicted. Renge powered up, locked into a solid stance, and knew the next strike would end it. No more hesitating against that armored beast. Renya snapped into motion with razor focus and lightning speed, muscles coiled tight as she barreled forward, ready to unleash her final attack. Her punch landed flush on the dragon's jaw, smashing through its armored hide with a violent burst of force and pure fury. Even while the beast howled in agony, Renge fought tooth and nail, yanking against its limbs and refusing to let it take control. Slime and blood soaked her as she stood there, victorious, one life taken but two dragons still stalking the hunt. 2 weeks later, Renge finally let her guard down, soaking alone in a desert spring and healing in silence after that brutal mission out in the sand. Ranger rolled back into town and the kids erupted in cheers, 3 dragons already down, and the whole marketplace filled with grateful voices. The boy beamed and thanked her with all his heart, because now his father's recovery was finally within reach, all thanks to Range's fearless push. Reng cut loose at the guild, cracking jokes about dragon meat while she settled the bill, and when the payment didn't show up yet, she just shrugged. No big deal. The guildmaster shoved a letter into her hands and her eyes snapped wide, because it was from Sort and Aina had sent it. After she read the letter, Renge threw her weapon down and sprinted, her panic screaming that something urgent had just gone down. Ranked stormed out of the guild, screaming that it was an emergency, and he totally ditched the letter he'd left behind. She tore through the wilderness in a blind fury. Aina and Sort were in real danger, and she swore she'd rescue them with her own hands. That name seared into her mind. Renya clenched her fists and swore it all came down to one man, Itsuki. Rage surged through her when she remembered the rumors. Teeth clenched, she charged ahead with pure, blazing determination. Suddenly, she spotted Itsuki, and before he could even turn around, she lunged forward and roared at him to stop right now. Renge yanked out her blade, but Shiro slammed it aside in a rage. One more step from Renge and she's getting hit. Itsuki blurted Shiro's name in shock, and just like that, the confrontation spiraled into something way more personal and totally blindsiding. Renji slammed into the hallway and snapped at Shiro with a growl, but Shiro refused to back down. Tension crackled between them, thick as steel. Steel collided with steel. Shiro snapped into a fierce parry as Renji's full power crashed in, smashing their blades into an unbreakable deadlock. As the scuffle blew up, onlookers jerked in shock. Renge shoved even harder, snapping at Shiro, totally oblivious to the crowd forming right behind them. A man lunged right in between them, slamming the brakes on Shiro's strike. Rings scowled, shocked at the sudden, totally unannounced interference. Rengi snapped free and slammed her fist into the ground right beside them, blasting stone apart. Then her rage swung straight onto Itsuki. Shiro snapped a high kick toward Renji, but Renji slammed her knee up to stop it, and that strike shattered Shiro's dagger right out of the air. Ringei grabbed Kairo by the leg, yanked her hard to the floor, then threw her across the tavern in a burst of pure frustration. Shiro's airborne form burst into view and the nearby guests panicked. One girl screamed, covered her face, and Shiro kept flying straight at them. Shiro plopped awkwardly onto the girl's back, leaving her stunned, and the entire crowd completely speechless. Shiro lunged to strike again, but Rangja was already set, taunting her with a grin, then snapping into an instant counterattack. Shiro somersaulted past Renge's swing, barely sliding out of the strike, and as her momentum carried her, he snapped his body into position for a razor-fast counterattack. Both fighters froze in place, eyes locked as they judged every move. Shiro lifted her arms to strike, while Renge dug in, bracing for impact. Shiro's leg snapped through the air and slammed a perfectly clean kick into Range's side, the impact reverberating instantly. Renger's body spasmed hard from the hit, and a brutal snap rang out when she clenched her teeth through the pain. Renya got slammed across the floor. Right when neither of them could even react, Itsuki showed up and stopped everything cold on the spot. Shiro loomed over Renja's fallen body, claws raised high, murder in his eyes. He was seconds from ending it for good. Right before Shiro could land the strike, a hand clamped down on her wrist and stopped her at the very last second. Itsuki blurted out who Renj really was, and Shiro froze, because it hit him. Renj wasn't the enemy at all, just an ally everyone misunderstood. Renj, still shaking with weakness, confirmed it all, then swore she'd personally go rescue her beloved companions, even Dainen's sort be damned. Renge, her voice shaking with defiance, vowed she'd rescue them all by herself. Then Itsuki grabbed Shiro and urged him to run. With a wounded body but fire in her heart, Renya hissed that she needed to reach Aina and Sort, then tuned out everything else around her completely. Sensing danger, Shiro snapped her head toward the threat, grabbed her master, and yanked him back just in time to dodge the thing that came flying at them. The projectile tore past Itsuki by a breath, and Shiro's instincts yanked him out of the way, yet the threat still hung in the air. Shiro vowed she'd block every threat, then snapped at Itsuki to sprint ahead without a second thought or a single delay. Shiro lunged forward like a fighter who wouldn't back down, and Itsuki started chanting spells, fully trusting her own words and swearing they'd win no matter the cost. Renj snapped her magic on with pure rage, swearing Shiro would never slip away, and a deadly spell blazed under her feet. Crystalline spikes erupted from the ground as Rang screamed, and the spell blasted outward, sharp, swift, and unstoppable. Shiro snapped into action, darting aside from the spike barrage while bracing herself with a shield, and Itsuki sprinted in the distance, hot on her trail. As Shiro hit the ground, her eyes popped wide. Renja's magic wasn't coming for her at all, it was blasting towards someone else. A spike tore into Itsuki's side, blood surged down as his eyes went wide and jittered. He was caught off guard, right in the middle of his sprint. Itsuki crumpled completely, blood pouring into his side, and in his half-awake haze, the horror finally clicked into place. On the icy floor, Itsuki groaned through sheer pain, blood pouring out of his hand, real, brutal, and his. Shirenault beside him panicked. She grabbed his shoulders, begged him to stay awake, and shook him as he stumbled down the steep slope. Renj stormed up again, her voice like a blade, snapping at Shiro to move, yet he just froze, even as his body shook beneath the silence. Just like that, the town guards crashed into the scene, and a brand new voice snapped, "That's enough, fight's over." Every single person froze on the spot. Soldiers ringed them in a tight wall, but Reng didn't budge, while Shiro dropped to her knees beside Itsuki, her face blank, her heart crushed in silence. Lord Yashu stormed in, dragging out a heavy sigh at the wreckage, and stared down the chaos with pure, grim disappointment. Wendy shoved past the guards, begging over and over to reach Itsuki, and her sheer desperation hit everyone like a gut punch. She slid right up beside him, wrapped her arms around him gently, and pleaded, "Please stay alive a little longer." Itsuki cracked his eyes open, weak and trembling, while tears spilled down his face, and Wendy rushed to him, her voice shaking as she worried sick about her master. Guards ringed Renj with spears pointed at him, while Wendy clutched Itsuki to her chest, begging with everything she had for him to stay alive. Shiro snapped his head back in silence, while Wendy screamed for help right when Rengi's face went icy, steel-cold, and unshakably determined. Yasus demanded medical help, and Wendy sprang into action. She shoved a healing potion onto the wound while Itsuki hissed and groaned in raw pain. A guard shoved forward and shouted, "You're under arrest." Then spears surged in as she stood there, silent and still. Renj didn't give a warning. She slammed magic into the ground under her feet, and when the guards yelled, she swung her leg up like she was about to burst straight through them. Renj cast Quagmire, and the earth turned mushy in an instant. Guards jolted, stumbled, and dropped down, utterly baffled by the ground giving way under their feet. The guards panicked as the boggy ground grabbed their legs, and they yelled in pure terror, stuck, stumbling, and unable to move or keep their balance. She dropped from way up high, slammed onto a solid top floor, and left the soldiers stranded behind her in the chaos. Renja's eyes blazed with madness. She barreled straight at Wendy, seized by an urge to kill and refusing to hesitate for a single second. Wendy threw her body in front of Itsuki, bracing as the wrench swooped in, going completely still and refusing to budge. Right as Reng slammed toward Wendy, Shiro exploded into the air and snatched them out of midair, catching both fighters completely off guard. Shiro's kick slammed into Renji's side and she flew backward, crumpling in agony as her balance vanished. A thunderous crack ripped the air as rubble caved in. Shiro slammed onto the ground, stunned to the core, while Renji vanished under a mountain of broken stone. Shiro loomed over Renji, who lay unconscious under a pile of rubble, while smoke hissed into the air and the room fell into a grim, dead silence. Shiro just stared in silence as Renji got yanked into custody on Yasus's command, and the guards swarmed in like it was already decided. Shiro stayed ice calm, reminding everyone that their injured master, Itsuki, needed urgent care more than any thank you. Wendy snapped that they had to haul him straight to the Adventurers Guild, because his potions were locked away there, ready for emergencies. Renji crumpled, bruised, and spent, then grabbed Yasus' fate, shouting for the guards to haul her safely to his mansion. Outside the Adventurers Guild, Yasus shot one last look over everything, making sure nothing was missing to treat Itsuki. Lying there, unconscious, Itsuki twitched weakly and Wendy stayed glued to his side, praying under her breath that he'd pull through safe. Itsuki jolted awake, dizzy and drained, and found himself in the Adventurers Guild, safe, cared for, and completely stunned. Shiro burst in, sprinted straight at Itsuki, and clung to him as he blurted out non-stop apologies, wrecked by the guilt of what his injury did. Tears spilled down Shiro's face as she confessed she couldn't protect him, then blamed herself for every last drop of that deadly wound. Itsuki pulled Shiro close, soothing her heart and telling her that her courage literally saved him from something far worse, because he owed her his life. Wendy and Shiro wiped tears away as Itsuki thanked them both, his gratitude pouring out for the courage and support they'd given him. Wendy told him those potions kept Itsuki alive, but no matter what, the wound would always leave a scar behind. Itsuki blurted out, panicked, where Sort and Aina were, but ever since that attack, nobody had seen hide nor hair of them. Right then, Aina burst in and blurted out that Renji was being kept under guard at Lord Yasus' mansion. Aina came back in full armor, soaking up every word Yasus just told her, and when she finally looked at Itsuki, her face was grim with worry. She sank into a deep bow, apologized for what happened, and swore this was the best deal she could offer right now. Aina finally confessed that Renji was behind the attack, and it blew everyone's mind with the real truth hiding inside her apology. When Renji's past finally comes to light, Aina drops the truth. She once fought right beside her, then she's left stunned, crushed, and totally baffled by the betrayal. Wendy pressed for answers about Sort's location, and Aina stalled hard, because she knew the truth would blow up their world even more. At Yasus' mansion, Rangele and Chains burst into action, hauling a laundry list of crimes behind them: assault, smuggling, and forcing the gate. Shackled by shame, Renji was hauled into punishment for her attempted murder, the wreckage she caused, and the betrayal of everyone who put their trust in her. Rengjard the guard confirmed that Itsuki was still alive, and as he bowed, guilt crept up in silence, soaking every beat of her heart. Yasus slammed down his verdict without a shred of mercy, his voice thick with disappointment that her plans still didn't get the job done. Ring thrashed against enchanted chains, but no matter how hard she fought, the monster-forged bonds held fast. Yishu's forged rare copper restraints that crushed both magic and raw power, then sealed them tight with anti-casting talismans. Rengsh clenched her teeth as heavy panting filled the air, desperate urgency yanking her toward a purpose she couldn't even see yet. Sort burst in, stunned by the sight of Renj tied up and shattered, and her mind just couldn't accept what she was seeing. Sort stumbled on Ren cowering under the roof, shaking like a leaf. Then she shot her hand out, feeling danger close in behind them. Yasus stood ice-cold by the door, Renj was pinned in restraints, and Sort blasted out with furious protests. Rage seethed in Sort's chest as she snapped at Yasu for cruelty. She blamed him for locking Renj up for no reason at all. Yasus snapped back hard, throwing the blame straight at Sort, saying her reckless choices sparked the damage and put her master in real danger. Yasus finally uncovered the hidden letter, Sort's doing, and it summoned Rangi, igniting the whole brutal mess. Yasus shot Sort a cold look and reminded her, straight up, "Your intentions don't mean a thing, justice only cares about the fallout." He slammed Renya with the charge of criminality, and right in the middle of the chaos, an ally got hurt, and someone big time was moments away from dying. Right in the middle of Sort, Yasus condemned her again, and as guilt crushed Yasus, Ren burst in with a loud shout to stop him. She tore free with a thunder of rattling chains, shouting that it was downright unfair for Sort alone to take the fall for Rengi's crime. Renji unleashed a fierce confession. She owned everything, swore she acted solo to protect Aina and Sort, and said she'd do it again without a single shred of regret. Soul's crying finally died down and Renge's voice cracked as she demanded, no, insisted, that she was wrong to carry everything by herself. Sort finally owned up to the truth, Aina and she hadn't been abused at all, and Renge had totally misread what was really happening. Tears streamed down Sort's face as shame forced a shaky apology out of her, and Renge, scrambling with worry, blurts out, "Why are you suddenly apologizing like this?" Lord Yeshu said through clenched teeth that Sort and Aina weren't being mistreated, because they'd signed a debt slavery contract themselves. But the truth finally surfaced. The guild had cheated a merchant and Sort and Aina swallowed the punishment in dead silence. Rang finally saw the truth. Sort and Aina had been forced into slavery, but instead of breaking, they chose it side by side willingly. Yasis straight up said the letter wasn't warning anyone, it was pure misdirection, just unfinished words from Lokak Guild. That letter landed way too late. By the time the full truth finally surfaced, the damage was already done. Sort froze, couldn't even speak, because the truth hit like a tidal wave and everything crashed down into a misunderstanding she never meant to cause. Back then, jealousy and fear swallowed her whole. She resented his very presence and hated the way Aina's smile lit up the room. Sort kept replaying those bright, happy times with Itsuki and Aina, and even with that resentment still burning, he greeted her with open, welcoming warmth. Itsuki forgave her on the spot, no hesitation at all, clutching a flower as he beamed, never once judging her for the feelings she couldn't hold back. With him there, her fury snapped into laughter. Slowly, guilt melted away and her heart finally began to open. But then shame slammed back in. She remembered writing that letter in secret, tangled in confusion, shaking with fear and burning with pride. Tears streaming, she confessed everything. She crushed Renge, put Itsuki in danger, and finally realized she'd been acting like a kid. Sort collapsed to her knees, choking back sobs as she begged for forgiveness over and over, "I'm sorry," until the whole room felt like it was holding its breath. She sank to her knees and begged for mercy, admitting every fault, swearing she'd do anything, then pleaded for Renge's forgiveness and safety. Reng raged as he fought to protect Sort, and she snapped that accusing him of slave trading could unleash even worse danger. Reng confessed once more, then begged to be punished instead, but Yasis crushed her letter because he wasn't after apologies, he was after the truth. With tears still on their faces, both of them apologized. Renge admitted Sort's sincerity, overwhelmed by her kindness, and then Lord Yeshu's quietly started clapping for them. Yasis celebrated their unity like it was something truly admirable, but then his voice snapped, because no matter what, the law and its consequences were still coming. So he lifted his hand like a command, and even tears couldn't rewrite a thing. Every verdict would stand, no exceptions. Yasis taunted Sort to her face, like her hard-earned adventurer fame meant nothing now. Then he coldly threatened to drag her into criminal slavery. Renge slammed the accusation onto Yeshu's, but Yeshu's shot it down cold, saying the law, not feelings, would decide what happened to them. Right then, the man everyone recognized stormed into the room, Hitsuki muttering an apology under his breath, yet every word still landed heavy. He stepped forward like he owned the moment, calmly begging Yasis to listen, then flashed a smile and dared the whole situation to justify its unfairness. Yasis froze in shock and Sort's tear-filled eyes lifted with bright hope, because everything now balanced on the man's words. Itsuki shot up from his seat, shocking the whole room, and even with his wounds, he faced them with bold confidence, like he was determined to keep everyone from noticing his deeper worry. Sort froze in pure guilt, tears burning the moment she saw Itsuki standing there alive. She couldn't even move, just kept whispering shattered apologies. Sort dropped to her knees and spilled the whole truth, her voice shaking like thunder, because she was convinced she'd shattered everything for good. Itsuki softly tapped her head and he smiled, steady and calm, not angry at all, like he was reassuring her of something she never saw coming. He yanked her close without a second thought. "Trust me, leave it all to me," he whispered, and she finally crumpled into tears. Renge slowly cracked her eyes open, cold air biting her skin, while chains clattered and echoed in the dark room. Itsuki stormed in and demanded the Renge's restraints be ripped off, but Lord Yeshu's shut her down on the spot, calling her a dangerous criminal the moment she arrived. Itsuki tried to talk it out and even offered to cover the damages, but Yasis brushed him off and left the decision squarely in the Lord's hands. While they were still hashing it out, Itsuki swore he'd bring in more gold. Yasus teased him with a sly grin, intrigued but not ready to back him yet. Itsuki shot his voice out, begging straight to Yasus' face, but Yasus shut him down with a cold, final answer that locked Renga's fate in place. Aina strode forward with iron resolve, swore she'd take the blame, and pleaded with Lord Yeshus to free Rangja and Sort. Yasus demanded, voice like ice, whether she'd become their criminal slave. Aina only nodded, eyes blazing, ready to protect her friends no matter what. Sort burst into tears, begging Aina not to go through with it, while Itsuki froze in stunned disbelief at her unshakable resolve. Yasus, still shaking a little, cleared up the mess because forgiveness by itself wasn't going to cut it. Justice had to step in next, no matter how anyone felt. He laid it out for everyone: lawbreakers don't get to slip free, and order has to stand, even if it crushes hearts on the way. Yesis shot down the idea with a hard no, because in this world, law rules everything, so he pushed Itsuki to quit dreaming and fall in line. Itsuki hesitated for a breath, then finally admitted the law stood immovable. But he wasn't done laying out his case yet. He flipped the whole strategy, approaching Yasis not like a lord, but like a sharp merchant ready to strike a deal and talk their way out. Itsuki threw everything he had, his own skin, his knowledge, even his past, on the table as leverage, and he drilled into Yasus just how priceless that outside, foreign insight could be. Itsuki spun around and proposed an exchange. He dangled alchemy's promise, pushing for a deal that went way beyond mercy. Itsuki snapped his tone into something deadly calm, offering up himself as collateral to flip that brutal ruling with a calculated deal. Even after Yasus warned them, Itsuki and Aina refused to back down, so Itsuki shoved the idea forward. A straight-up competition to settle it once and for all. Itsuki laid down ironclad terms: if she won, Renge and Sort would leave unscathed, with nothing held against them. Yasus threw everyone for a loop with a shocking twist. Turns out the final call wasn't even his, and Itsuki quickly learned that pleading alone wouldn't cut it. Yasus leaned in, eyes sharp with interest, and gave the proposal his stamp, then warned them that one wrong move could wipe out everything. Itsuki tossed out his last demand: lifelong servitude if they lost, and the moment he stepped up to sacrifice himself, the whole room went silent, stunned. Reng screamed in total disbelief, trapped and drowning in his arms. Still, she couldn't wrap her head around why he'd risk everything for her. Itsuki smiled softly, planting the truth that Renga mattered to Aina, and Sort's words snapped his doubts into steel. Family was everything. In a flashback, Rangsialvald, she vividly replayed her desperate escape, and a gut punch hit. She'd always been protected all along. Tears poured down her face and Renge finally snapped. She felt every ounce of guilt and shame, blaming herself for everything and calling herself nothing but foolish. Shiro leaned in and quietly warned Itsuki, Jordan, Yasus's partner, wasn't working right, and this challenge could suddenly turn into a brutal, one-sided disaster. Still, Itsuki flashed a confident smile. Shiro's calm belief in him only fueled his reckless drive even more. Pride locked in tight, Yasus took the challenge head-on, because as a merchant, backing away would have smeared his name forever. Yasus laid out the challenge format again, same brutal setup as a past trial, forcing him to pull off lightning-fast, high-stakes money moves or get crushed. Itsuki had one brutal week to earn 120 million Naru, miss it, and he'd lose the whole battle, no question. Yasus slapped down brutal rules: no shared pink rotor rights, no exceptions, while help from allies stayed totally allowed. Renge and Sort were handed to Itsuki on a temporary leash, staying with him until the game was finally over. A brand new day broke under glowing skies, and after grueling negotiations, peace finally settled in, with calm taking over the whole group. Exhausted to the bone, Itsuki still pushed everyone out the door, and you could see it, tired faces, but finally, the night's heavy weight was lifted. Rang snapped him to a halt, and then her tears hit all over again as she begged for forgiveness, crushed by guilt, desperate to earn redemption too. Sort finally crumpled and confessed everything, tears streaming as she begged them to see the truth. Ranji wasn't at fault at all, it was all on her. Aina even apologized to Itsuki, and he shot back that it was over, that the pain had finally faded and they'd already suffered enough. When the sunlight finally came back, Itsuki cracked a smile and declared, "All right, it's time to rest," because their brutal ordeal was finally over. They made it back home, but the air felt wrong. Wendy greeted them with a smiling mask, hiding a fury that was boiling underneath. Itsuki apologized for his absence, and everyone clocked Renji. Then Wendy, with a sudden burst, crept up and slapped him. Wendy stepped in with calm control, told everyone to settle down, and slowly, peace started creeping back as breakfast prep began. Wendy pulled me aside and confessed she was terrified of getting left behind again. she just wanted to feel like she belonged, for once. Itsuki didn't feed him lies, he hit him with the truth, because some things can't be rewound, but comfort can still hold the pieces together. At breakfast, they leaned in, laughing over warm bread. Sure, a slower life was waiting, but not for right now. Itsuki jolted awake way too late in a soft bed, miles from home, with birds chirping outside walls that didn't feel like his own. Staring out at the town from this brand new world, Itsuki couldn't shake the feeling that trouble was already waiting for him around the corner. Shiro and Renge saw him as a threat, and their ambush ripped his peaceful life apart in an instant. Even with chaos crashing in, Itsuki pushed through, and now he has to beat Yasus to save his friends. With only 7 days left, Itsuki never slowed down, hammering away day and night, forging the supplies he'd need for a challenge that could decide his whole future. Yasus laid down ruthless rules, no help allowed, then still raked in 120 million Nords in just 1 week. Itsuki realized the banned items wrecked his best plan. Working alone just couldn't bring in the money fast enough. He managed to save half the goal, but the other half still hung in the air. Then he headed straight for the bathhouse and ran into Shiro. Shiro demanded to go with him, and Itsuki flashed a smile, praying that the warm water would finally drown his worries. As he finally kicked back, he snapped at Shiro for snatching his food. Shiro blushed and apologized, swearing she only did it because she was starving. Itsuki stumbled into the bath by accident and froze cold, because Renge and Sort were already soaking together inside. Panic exploded in Sort the second he snatched that bucket, so Itsuki shot off a frantic apology, throwing his hands up and shielding his eyes in pure mortified embarrassment. Still rattled, Sort drew her cloak tight, then shot a furious glare. Those quiet words hit Itsuki so hard he turned away, ashamed. Renge and Sort sat in dead silence, while Itsuki stared, baffled by Sort's sudden mood swing, and finally blurted out questions about what had changed. Sort snapped at him, rage spilling out with every shout. Renge just watched, dead calm, while Itsuki got hit with a brutal soaking blow. Shiro locked eyes with Renge, then called her over. He sprinted up, threw his arms wide, and demanded that she take a shower. Together, they bathed Bachihiro, steam billowed, while Sot calmly coached her, and Renge quietly melted into relief. Renji snapped the silence, asking Shiro if she was hurt, and Shiro answered with a grin, praising her strength without even pausing for breath. Everyone broke into laughter, and even after that earlier scolding, Shiro's smile snapped back like nothing happened. Then Ren loosened up too, finally looking at ease again. Later on, Wendy slid over some snacks and Aina popped one in her mouth. Then she quietly whispered thanks, stunned by how comforting it tasted. Wendy flashed a bright smile and offered snacks, and Aina didn't even hesitate. She praised Wendy's skill, calling her amazing in a low, sincere voice. Aina confessed that even with her power, she still felt pointless. Then she cringed with shame, knowing she'd leaned on Itsuki more than she ever meant to. With her back to them, Ine snapped at herself, pathetic. Wendy stayed calm, no judgment at all, just listening in quiet silence. Wendy spilled her heart she'd trade anything for Itsuki, but he kept slipping away with that cold, emotional distance, and Itsuki clasped her hands and confessed that he loved Wendy, and the moment the words hit, tears flooded her eyes because she finally heard exactly what she needed. Wendy leaned in and told Ine she believed in her, then Ine's lips curled into a faint smile, like hope had shown up right where she'd braced for a scolding. With the sun finally bursting through the sky, Ine planted her feet and swore to give it her all. Itsuki's face contorted with stress, only 5 days left, and even with everything he'd thrown at it, progress still refused to move. Panic slammed into him as he pictured Yasus tying him up and punishing him, and he finally admitted he couldn't carry the whole load alone anymore. With no other route left, Itsuki weighed Darwin in his mind, even if doubt gnawed at him, because the danger lurking behind that decision rattled his bones. As Itsuki wrestled with rising anxiety, the doors eased open. Wendy slipped in softly and revealed there was an unexpected guest waiting downstairs. To his horror, Darwin's daughter stood there, smiling sweetly, then panic slammed into him. Why would she show up now? Trying to steady his nerves, Itsuki demanded to know why Mera was here. When she brought up that brothel incident, color drained from his face in an instant. She pressed for the cash, and Itsuki confessed the fight he'd been fighting, and somehow her calm voice still hit him right in the heart as she listened. With a curious sparkle in her eyes, Mera urged him to look inward, because if life feels crushing, the real problem might be coming from him. They questioned Itsuki's skills, and the whispers said it plain. his secret powers weren't just about alchemy. She leaned in, flashed a smile, and fired off questions about new skills, like she could feel he was hiding something. After Mater dropped the word goddess, Itsuki froze in deep thought, then threw himself into one question: what kind of skills did he just get? He flicked his status card on with a tap and it snapped into existence. So Mater leaned in, curious as ever, and demanded he show the whole thing. That glowing screen flashed a whole lineup of skills, alchemy sitting way at the top, and crazy extras like pocket money popping out like an instant standout. Shocked, Itsuki stared at his alchemy skill and realized it had leveled up. Then it hit him how many times he'd been using it without even noticing. He stared at his hand and felt his progress click into place, and with the tools all around him, he got ready to forge something useful again. Itsuki poured his heart into studying forgery and hand molding. Each gave him a huge boost, but the limits were real, and he couldn't afford to ignore them. He crafted one-of-a-kind goods by shaping them by hand, then wrestled with the idea of mass-producing them by forging copies, knowing it would wreck the quality. Mera reminded him he didn't belong, so he had to map out his sales and resources with laser focus. Itsuki stared ahead, resolve igniting in his chest, then stepped up to speak, begging everyone in the estate for their support. Sara, Renge, Aina, and the others fall silent as Itsuki's request hangs in the air, because this right here is the moment their futures start changing together. Sort, Renge, and Aina burst with eager loyalty, shouting out loud as soon as they heard what Itsuki truly needed. Itsuki shoved a resource list into their hands and demanded they gather everything right now. He made it sound like crafting depended on it. His second request shocked everyone. One of them had to strip, and the quiet room instantly snapped into confusion. They totally misread what he meant, and while Ine bravely stepped up, she had no clue he was talking about something totally different for the alchemy test. The girls surged with pure adrenaline, locked in, fearless, and together, and they set off to carry out his request. Itsuki begged Wendy for help, and she said yes on the spot, while Shiro sprawled and napped and the rest of them finally kicked into gear. He ground through the night with forgery and hand molding, sweat and exhaustion crashing down on him even with those enhancement potions. Wendy brushed over him gently, whispering thanks as his final words slipped into sleep, locked on the selling job waiting for tomorrow. Itsuki stood tall and declared their timeline, 4 days left, and everyone packed in for the final make it or break it push. Everything was set and ready, so the team clenched their fists, stood shoulder to shoulder, and vowed they'd sell every last thing together. The market square erupted with noise as crowds swarmed in, curious adventurers and townsfolk alike, lured by a brand new shop shrouded in mystery. Driven by pure curiosity, a squad of girls leaned in from the distance, couldn't stand it anymore, and teamed up to investigate together. As the crowd tore a path for them, Renge, Aina, and Sort stood tall on the front display stage like they owned the moment. Wearing dazzling outfits, the three girls turned heads the second they struck their confident poses, and suddenly the whole shop felt bigger and brighter. Itsuki shouted from the side, pumping up their sales with pure adrenaline, and the customers came rushing in, swarming their booming stand. Renge couldn't stop raving about how tough and comfortable the gear felt, and Sort sealed the deal by insisting it brought blessings, winning over customers in a heartbeat. Aina raved about how stunning and versatile it was, and instantly both adventurers and fashion lovers were hooked by the design. Excitement exploded, everyone was hunting the exact same items the girls were wearing, and Itsuki threw out discounts like he could boost sales overnight. Wendy and the crew keep the customers moving like clockwork, and the whole marketplace bursts with laughter and non-stop smiles. Backstage, Mater strutted up to Itsuki with pride glowing on his face. The whole plan finally clicked, and that huge, quiet relief hit him as he smiled. The plan hit perfect, and Shiro plus the others pulled the spotlight. Boom, demand for women's gear shot up instantly. Mera snapped Itsuki's mind back to the borrowed property, and he stalled for a second, hating owing people, but still took the opening, grateful in spite of himself. Even though Itsuki hesitated, he still admitted her support. Mera watched that honesty land, and she couldn't help but find him fascinating, even with all his awkward quirks. Only 3 days left, Itsuki went into full production mode, cranking out creations, selling them, repeating the grind, all because a brutal deadline was creeping closer. With pure joy and a huge sigh of relief, they celebrated together, because they'd done it and everyone proved it with everything they had. Wendy's cheeks flared with gratitude, and Itsuki stepped in right away to thank her for designing the outfits and accessories. At Yasa's mansion, Itsuki marched in with the full cash and proudly paid the secured funds, buying Sort and Rengus their freedom. Yasa's confirmed the 120 million NAR. Hitsuki turned down dinner and kept his promise like clockwork. Locked in, no distractions. Later that night, the whole crew packed in to celebrate, cups raised in pure joy, and Sort broke down in overwhelming relief as the cheers hit. Laughter thundered through the room as Itsuki chugged drink after drink, grinning like he'd won, while the others erupted in cheers and a couple shot out warnings. Don't push it too far. Renji inched up to Itsuki with a bashful smile, hurriedly apologizing for all the mess from before, while Itsuki stayed cool and quiet, carefully gripping his drink like it mattered. Under the moonlight, they beamed, everyone safe and nothing left to fear. With full hearts, their gratitude closed the journey in quiet peace. Itsuki leaned out the window, gulped in a deep breath, and then used his mysterious forgery skill to whip up a potion like a master. After forging a handful of vials, he finally saw it. His skill shot up and alchemy hit 9, and the experience circle lit up like a victory bell. He stared at the strange words hovering in midair, and confusion hit him like a wall as he just froze, blankly staring at the blue morning sky. Back home, Shiro snapped that the costs were climbing fast and Itsuki couldn't shake it. More mouths meant way more work just to keep everyone comfortable. Wendy jumped in to help, but Itsuki snapped no. He swore as the provider, he'd handle everything himself. Wendy's words hit him hard. She didn't crave riches at all. She just wanted to pass happiness to Itsuki. Even with her backing, Itsuki kept pushing, begging Reinrich for more work, praying that extra cash would finally take the weight off their shoulders. Reinrich cut him off with a stern warning. She admired how far he'd come, but she made it clear, don't let your alchemy slip. Itsuki broke down how the new skill suddenly lit up while he was crafting. Then Experience Circle kicked in on its own, boosting his alchemy like it was nothing. Reinrich listened with rapt focus as she ordered him to guard that skill like a secret weapon, because one slip could drag in the wrong kind of attention. Reinrich snapped at him again. Level 9 alchemists were freakishly rare, and anyone else could snatch those priceless skills and use them for themselves. She handed him the potion job and gave him 3 days. Then Itsuki happily snatched the responsibility right away. As he made his way home, Itsuki replayed Reinrich's instructions in his head, realizing just how sharp she was and how much he'd grown because of it. When Itsuki thought back to his old job, pride lit him up, because alchemy life fit him way better than that stiff corporate grind. Right then, a girl barreled into him without warning. He stumbled backward and slammed hard, stunned by the sudden hit. Itsuki got knocked backward by a brutal collision, dizziness crashing in as pain flared, and he groaned through the stunned shock of it all. The second he opened his eyes, he groaned. His face was shoved awkwardly into a stranger's thigh. A girl sat there, stunned and dazed on top of him, and then she winced hard, clutching her head like she couldn't figure out what just happened. The girl called him Big Brother, and Itsuki erupted in panic, shouting at her to get off right now, before it went any further. She squirmed and accused him of touching her, and as they tangled up even more, horrified bystanders stared in disbelief. Itsuki slumped beside the fountain, stunned out of his mind, while the girl kept blurting out apologies and blaming gravity for the whole chaotic crash. She beamed, introduced herself as Orgal, and her bold charm hit him like a truck, especially when she casually clocked that he was a drifter. Orgal nonchalantly dropped that her grandfather was the town's lord, and Itsuki just couldn't wrap his head around how insanely wealthy she was. Panicked, Itsuki begged her to keep the incident quiet, and she nodded, then laughed and called him just a little scary. Orgal dragged herself into his plan, brushed off his protests, and right there on the spot called it a date, grinning as she happily followed him. Perched on the overlook, Itsuki and Orgal soaked in the view of a lively town, where life buzzed and pure joy lit up every street. Itsuki stared back at his old world, fewer smiles, heavier pressure in every breath, and even with its flaws, this new world still felt like an open door. He didn't shy away from the hardships, but he still lit up talking about the warm people around him, the ones who laughed together and lived side by side. Orgal swallowed hard, thanking him in a quiet voice, and as he opened his heart, her eyes softened like they'd finally come home. With a dazzling grin, Orgal bolted away, and Itsuki snapped another warning, don't trip on the downhill. Yasus rolled in by carriage, waved his escorts away, and stood there ice calm, ready to meet the Lord. Yasus cleared his throat and marched straight into the Lord's grand estate, ready to deliver his report face to face. Yasis broke down what happened with Ren Sh. No one violated a rule, but the crowd's eyes demanded he say something. He pushed for fairness but begged for leniency too, hinting that Itsuki's got something special, and that judgment should fit the moment's true weight. The Lord agreed, and yeah, Itsuki felt weird as hell, but in the best way, because Yasis was already tied to his past, and suddenly everything clicked. When they asked, Origal shrugged and said she'd met Itsuki, and the moment her face shifted, you could tell curiosity was already lighting up her thoughts. Sinking into her chair, she smirked and admitted, turns out, Itsuki might be my kind after all. Origal lounged like she owned the room, openly showing she was into Itsuki, and Yasis shot back with quiet concern and a flicker of surprise. Yasis clocked Origal's condition spiraling fast, her smile stayed in place, but every cough ripped the truth wide open about how bad things really were. Origal finally admitted the political handoff was collapsing. While Hayato and the others fought for every inch, she reluctantly started passing the torch, one painful decision at a time. Yasis fell into quiet thought, wondering if that drifter, Itsuki, could actually pull off what everyone else had failed to do before, somehow, against all odds. Yashu snapped for restraint, brushing her hopes aside as way too soon, then Origal just stood there in stunned silence, doubting his own judgment and the sharpness of his tone. Yas slips out with a quiet excuse, leaving Origal standing there, and as she watches him vanish, doubt crashes down on her like a heavy wave. Alone, she stared out the window, her heart quietly begging for more time to roam the city streets. Outside, the laundry flapped and twirled in the wind, while Wendy and Range hung sheets and chatted in low, cozy whispers. Wild winds whipped leaves into a frenzy, and Rang leaned in to reassure Wendy. Helping with chores was absolutely no trouble at all. Range nodded as he confirmed Einen's sword had been summoned by the master, and then, straight up, he couldn't stop staring at Wendy's gorgeous beauty. While Itsuki was tied up, Wendy waved him over and demanded lunch. Range nodded fast, and the two of them headed inside to dig in. At the table, Shiro dug in quietly. Wendy asked softly, and Shiro nodded, saying it was absolutely tasty. Wendy clocked Rengi's hesitation and pressed gently, and the moment she spoke, Rengi's cheeks flared. She blurted that the food was great, even though she wouldn't say another word. Renj snapped up, cheeks blazing, and blurted out an apology, because she'd never once truly owned up to her actions and expressed regret before. Wendy apologized too, guilt gnawing at her, and Itsuki quickly reassured her, because even though they barely knew each other yet, it was crystal clear how much she cared. Rang finally confessed her crime. She once tried to take out the very person Wendy now adores and serves. Renj's voice shook as she dropped into a deep bow, and with real shame burning in her chest, she finally poured out a heartfelt apology to Wendy. Wendy nodded back gently because Itsuki already forgave her, so Wendy swallowed the guilt, accepted it, and moved on. With a warm smile, Wendy told Itsuki she'd forgiven him, and her love pulled her to choose peace and healing. After that, Wendy slid out of the way. Renji promised to grab food for Itsuki, and Shiru shot in a sharp warning before it was too late. Wendy gave a quiet little laugh, but worry was lurking behind it, and Itsuki kept grinding day after day, skipping meals like he didn't even notice. Her mind kept replaying him, the slump of exhaustion, the stubborn drive in his eyes, and she just wanted to find a way to take some of that weight off his shoulders. Then she leaned in and whispered the truth to herself again. She'd fallen hard for her gentle master. Every confession, every unspoken one, knotted her chest, and she was terrified her feelings would never land. And that thought hit her. He treated everyone with kindness like it was nothing, so she couldn't stop wondering, did she really stand out at all? Wendy leaned in toward Itsuki, chasing that same comforting warmth, and remembering how he hadn't touched her since that silent night. Longing crushed her chest. She needed certainty, she needed proof, so she reached out with one desperate hope, that he'd answer with real sincerity. With Wendy in his arms, she shut her eyes and begged for something real, love that didn't fade, love that never forgot her. Later, she sat in silence and shame hit hard in her chest. Then he treasured her like she was everything, so why did doubt still claw at her? Shiro pulled her into a soft embrace, and Wendy's voice shook as she finally told the truth. Her heart was the one breaking. Shiro tenderly soothed Wendy's wounded heart, and Wendy finally confessed, barely above a whisper, that the pain still clung to her inside. Meanwhile, Itsuki tore through dusty ancient tomes, hunting for the panacea, but every clue was tangled, incomplete, and missing the one crucial instruction he needed. He stumbled onto a description of a miracle cure, one that could bring back what was lost, from your body to your heart, all the way to your soul. With every step through the experience circle, a potion crystallized in his palm, light spiraled around it, bending to his focused will. Itsuki stared at the results like they might burn a hole through him. Yeah, the medicine worked, but the price could cut someone's life short. Renge hauled Wendy's lunch over and Itsuki instantly felt something was off. He thanked her, but his thoughts had already drifted somewhere else. He fixed his eyes on the potion again, heart thumping. If anyone else found out, would they shudder in fear or come hunting him? Itsuki stared at the potion and demanded answers about where it came from, because doubt crashed in hard. He couldn't tell if some divine power had actually guided him. Shiro cracked the door open and caught the tension in Itsuki's silence, then stayed perfectly quiet, afraid to spark any alarm. Wendy greeted him with a warm smile and he barely spoke, choosing silence like a shield, while something deeper churned in his chest. Later, he shot Wendy a grateful smile after lunch, while Renjin Shiro stepped in, offering help to calm the tension. Wendy wouldn't meet his eyes, just a soft smile, like a lock hiding the panic underneath. Then she pushed the tea forward, swallowing the truth she couldn't bring herself to say. Wendy bowed her head and her silence hit like a confession. Itsuki could feel the weight she'd been carrying deep inside. They slipped back home in silence and Itsuki instantly felt it. The air turned heavy, and that uneasy tension kept rising in his chest. Aina and Sort burst into the scene, armor battered to pieces, and their exhausted faces screamed that the danger waiting ahead was way bigger than anyone expected. A hot bath washed away the pain, eased their tense faces, melted the knots in their muscles, and lifted their spirits back from the brutal battlefield. Later, huddled side by side, they spilled everything. One guild request had backfired, and Itsuki just sat there, quietly getting more and more worried. The guild didn't beat around the bush. They demanded the capture of a mutated Vorpal bunny that had slipped away after betraying its own traitor. The creature was no legend, it was deadly ordinary, yet it was razor smart, always plotting, and it could command wild beasts with eerie, unheard signals. Sore laid out their loss. Yeah, the bunny simply left them in the dust, and Itsuki couldn't resist teasing her. She snapped back, swearing she'd get her revenge. With grit in their hearts, they rebuilt the party again. This time, Renger surged back alongside Aina and Sort, massively boosting their odds as they closed in on the hunt. Right before they left, Itsuki shot Shiro a wave, and then boom, Shiro got drafted too. With the whole crew finally together, they marched out. Shiro marched up to the sortie and begged for a child companion, fully convinced that real teamwork beats raw brute strength every single time. They charged out for the mission, laughing and trading jokes about dinner, while Itsuki stayed put, watching them vanish with rock-solid confidence. Once everyone else vanished, the house finally fell silent. Then Itsuki and Wendy realized they'd be eating dinner alone tonight. In that quiet, old memories crashed back in, like you had to remember how long it had been since it was just you and them. As Wendy slowly turned, tension slammed into the air and Itsuki's unease surged, because once again it was just the two of them alone. Dinner kicked off like everything was fine, but Itsuki tried to play it cool, until Wendy's gaze made the whole moment feel way too personal. That night, Itsuki stood alone, and the moonlight and silence made Wendy feel impossibly close. Awkward memories hit like a flashback, then he reminded himself, I'm not a teenager anymore, time to act grown. Still flustered but refusing to back down, Itsuki burst inside, his heart pounding like crazy, and somehow forced himself to answer with real confidence. Alone in the bath, Itsuki scrubbed herself to the bone, mouth moving as she drilled the words, do it properly this time, over and over. Itsuki dressed like it mattered, practiced everything until it stuck, then brushed and rinsed hard, and pumped himself up with snacks like a battle starter. He sprinted up to her door and stopped dead, hesitating like his courage vanished. The silence stretched tight while his fingers shook before he finally raised his hand to knock. Doubts crawled in, was Wendy really ready? And his thoughts spiraled into imagined judgment and frantic nervous chatter. Wendy's voice hit him like a lightning bolt, panic surged, weird thoughts got shoved back, and he stumbled backward with frantic, flustered steps. Wendy cracked the door open with a soft touch, welcomed him inside while he stammered, completely overwhelmed and lost. They sank into silence, the air so thick it felt like it could snap, and neither of them knew how to kick off this long-awaited moment that had been dragging on forever. Wendy pushed a cup of tea toward her, and Itsuki, shaking with nerves and duty, snapped her hand back just before she stood. He said her name with a sharp, serious voice, and his eyes burned with certainty, stronger than the doubts from before. He clutched her hand, his voice shaking, and begged, Could he still hold on to the promise they'd sworn together? She didn't say a word, just squeezed his hand, her eyes going gentle as the answer landed softly. Wendy smiled softly, her hands shaking, and as she closed her eyes and steadied her breathing, she whispered a trembling yes. Wendy closed the distance, spoke in a gentle whisper, and poured out her heart, begging him to stay by her side forever. Right as her words fizzled out, Itsuki closed the gap, lips crashing together and sealing a bond they'd been chasing for years. Tears burned in her eyes as she clung to him, and when she finally found her voice, she whispered, "I love you." Itsuki stood frozen in silence as Wendy closed the gap, and the moon above seemed to stare, shrinking the distance between them with every step. The curtain fluttered softly while he held her close, and she didn't fight back. His warmth sent a quiet tremor through her as she shook. As their lips closed in, Wendy froze in shock, and both of them burst with pounding heartbeats, torn between burning desire and pure nerves. Fingers gripped the fabric on instinct, and though neither of them said a word, something raw and private sparked between them, tense, held back but unmistakably shared. Itsuki murmured an apology, and Wendy, red-faced and gasping, said nothing, but her eyes stayed on him longer than ever. Wendy slid her hand around his neck with tender care, her whisper spilling warmth as she refused to let regret win. Clothes were dumped where they fell, and the night stayed frozen and silent, blind to the storm of emotions brewing inside. Wendy stood his way without a hint of shame, while Itsuki sat there, frozen silent, staring at her move with shaky, stunned awe. She inched closer, eyes gentle as dawn, and Itsuki reached out on instinct, like he'd finally found the trust he was waiting for. No words needed as they settled side by side, breaths weaving together, his hand hovering only long enough to read her face. When she nodded, it was quiet, sure, and completely real. Under dim light, Wendy clung to him, her breath racing as her heart surged, her mind blanking out, only warmth remained. They moved as one, still unsure but not scared. In that heartbeat, the silence screamed what none of them could say out loud. Between ragged breaths and bodies pressed close, every ounce of doubt vanished, so they held on tighter, letting each move speak trust and vulnerability without a single word. Whispers snapped into names, and their bond stopped rushing and started locking in, steady, fierce, and tied together by more than just desire. She instinctively lunged for his hand, and he took it gently, grounding her as the feelings stormed around them. The moon drained away grain by grain as night gave up the sky, and a heavy silence swallowed everything beyond their quiet little chamber. Morning burst in with sweet bird calls, and sunlight poured through the curtains, turning that once shadowed room blazing gold. Itsuki stirred awake, eyes gritty and heavy, and that night's warmth still clung to him, real, calm, and damn comforting. He rose in dead silence, flicking one last look over his shoulder, like something inside him had shifted, lighter on the surface, but iron-stamped with certainty. Wendy drifted off into a deep, peaceful sleep, her smile dropped without defenses, no words were spoken, but somehow everything between them was crystal clear. Itsuki swept her hair back in one soft motion, and a warm smile lit up her face as sleepy eyes shimmered with pure, peaceful contentment. Wendy flinched awake at his voice, cracked her eyes open, and softly met his gaze while still tucked in sleep. She welcomed him with open warmth right there in the quiet closeness of that morning. No speeches, no questions, just a simple, shared moment. Their lips met again, slow and steady, no rush, just calm, like they'd finally found peace, and that quiet moment sealed their new beginning. Elsewhere, deep in the trees beyond the quiet, something moved. Russell snapped to attention, stirred the brush, and stared in silence as it came closer. Deeper in the forest, Sort went sprinting like a storm, barreling after a sneaky rabbit with pure, wild rage. She snapped that she'd claimed this time. Then the rabbit flipped through the air, smirking like it was laughing at her. She lunged right past him, then snapped her tail hard, flicking dirt aside as she crouched, seething with frustration. Panting, she snarled, eyes blazing, unshaken, because she wouldn't let anyone mock her twice in the same hunt. Suddenly, a brutal growl ripped through the air behind him. Sort spun around and found his face inches from a towering beast, and yeah, there was no rabbit anymore. The beast slammed a limb forward, and she barely slipped out of the way, body stretched low and tight as her senses froze in full combat mode. Sort lunged to a new spot in a rush, her eyes locked on the beast as it thrashed in pain, still roaring with pure rage. A rabbit streaked through the grass again, darting under every footstep, and Rang stood poised nearby, ready to see where it would lead next. She stood her ground like a fortress, and when the rabbit sprinted toward her, she shifted her stance and tracked its frantic path in real time. The rabbit shot forward, Ranger's hand snatched the weapon out of the air, stopping its charge with effortless, battle-honed precision. The wrench's swing Something missed when the rabbit twisted midair. She spun like a blur to grab it before it slipped away. She steadied herself in a flash, clocked how fast it was, then snapped her stance just right to slam its escape route shut. The rabbit shot up like a rocket, then its path slammed straight into a cliff where Ine was already waiting. With a sudden slash, Aina's weapon snatched the blow right out of midair, then the rabbit screeched and tumbled, getting dragged closer to capture. Aina stomped down clean and solid, dust kicked up, and right as it settled, range and sort erupted in cheers, finally sealing the elusive target they'd been chasing. After the hunt, the team regrouped, mission done, and the trio traded real relief for quick, playful jabs. Sort stared at the captured beast, and its patched-up, battered body only made it creepier. Something wrong pulsed under the skin. That rabbit twitched like it knew a secret, laughing under its breath. Then, from the shadows, something else moved, fully awake and locked on it. Sort went stone still, eyes bulging with panic as the beast sprang forward, twitching wrong midair, and slammed her straight in the stomach. Right before she could even blink, it bolted away, then dead silence hit. Sort froze in place, shock blazing across her face. Shiro's arrival sparked another jolt, and the already battered rabbit got hurled across the area. One rabbit suddenly screamed, its body crackled with raw static, like it was warning everyone that something huge was about to hit. Elsewhere, Itsuki tore through the housework effortlessly, and Wendy perched on the stairs, watching with curiosity and a quiet, satisfied smile. A knock slammed through the air, then the door swung open and two visitors strode in. A young girl and an older butler, both wearing expressions you couldn't read. They stood in dead silence at the doorway, and whatever they carried with them, trust me, it was about to flip their whole world upside down. Once the wrench chaos finally died down, Itsuki thought he'd caught his breath, until Origal crashed in out of nowhere, no warning, no mercy. To explain how she looks, the story jumps back to the days before Itsuki ever inherited the estate. Inside a stinking dungeon, a monstrous beast exploded forward, jaws stretched wide, hunting every intruder it could shred in one brutal bite. Hayato lunged in a blur and carved a swift slash through the demon's torso before it could even twitch or lay a finger on his friend. Hayato locked his eyes on the target, clenched his fist hard, and braced for the next punch that would seal the fight. Right after the battle, Hayato sheathed his blade and raced to check everyone was safe and sound. Letty shot back smiles and said everyone was okay as they regrouped, slipping deeper into the dungeon's crumbling gut. Chris looked utterly drained, so Hayato called out for a break and let the whole party crash and rest for a moment. Letty thrust a drink into Hayato's hands as the crew huddled by their roaring boiling pot, catching their breath near the ancient ruins. They huddled over Origal's worsening health, and when they compared notes, they realized that rare elixir was tucked away deep in the dungeon's very last chamber. After the assassination attempt, Letty's mind raced. Origal's power made her the kind of target enemies couldn't ignore. Hayato stayed calm as he understood the motive, then slammed the truth down. Justice has to win, especially when someone pulls shady moves. While they headed down the path, Letty suddenly brought up Itsuki, wondering out loud how Hayato's friend was holding up outside the dungeon. Hayato sipped his tea, admitted he couldn't reach Itsuki, then swore he'd bring ore as thanks, like a promise burning in his words. Lady confessed she didn't actually hate Itsuki, and Hayato couldn't resist teasing her non-stop about the magic bag she just handed him. Letty got ambushed out of nowhere when that hungry teammate snapped and mistook her cloak for food. She yanked at Letty's skirt to make her point, barking for real food like a fight was breaking out, and she bulldozed right past everyone's shock and manners. Emily and Chris snapped at them to shut up, shouting, "Monsters can hear you." Chris reassured Hayato about her condition, while Letty snapped at MII again for reckless moves and inappropriate behavior. Once the party finally got their break, they regrouped and surged back into motion, pushing deeper into the ancient dungeon halls. They stood in silence, then announced their next mission with steel in their voices: rescue the feudal Lord Origal, and that promise ignited a brand new turn in their journey. Origal rolled in with her butler Soma and demanded a sudden, urgent meeting with Itsuki, like it couldn't wait even a second. The sudden visit knocked the wind out of Itsuki, and he fumbled for his words, trying to steady himself and answer her without stuttering. They sat down for tea. Itsuki swallowed his nerves and apologized, and Origal just cracked up, waving him off like, Relax, you'll be fine. She waved off her past problems with a carefree smile, and her not-quite-smart words ended up humiliating him right in front of him, while Soma just stood there, silent and tense, behind them. Origo stepped back into the spotlight and proudly laid out her halfling roots and newfound maturity, and Soma then confirmed their identities all over again, no doubts left. Orgel demanded to know about the estate, and Hitsuki spilled that he'd inherited it, then proudly painted the picture of its huge, fully equipped interior. Still hooked by the bath, Orgel casually asked for access at some point, clearly itching to enjoy those relaxing amenities. While they were chatting, Orgel suddenly broke into a coughing fit. Soma's concern shot up instantly, and Itsuki just kept praising the special bath at his estate. When Itsuki realized Wendy's condition was sliding downhill fast, he quietly slipped her a message: go get something urgent that could help Orgel recover. Wendy came back clutching a rare potion, and Soma accepted it with trembling caution while Orgel stared on, dying of weak curiosity. Orgel froze for a beat, then chugged the potion because Maria promised it would work, while Itsuki snapped that the price meant nothing at all. The change hit instantly. Orgel's power snapped back, and she let out a gentle thank you to everyone, then sank into her seat in relief. Relief hit Itsuki, and she pressed, "So, what's the real reason you came?" pushing the talk into something far more serious. Orgel laid out her mission as she dug into revenge from Redline, calling back to past incidents, ones we already knew like the back of our hand. She laid it all out for them, every finding stitched together from local testimonies, the guard's own statements, and Yashisu's report, ready to be reviewed officially. Orgel took in the situation, referenced the past agreements and everyone's tempers, then laid out her plan, impartial to the core but sharp enough to notice what others miss. She chose to swallow the incident, just this once, ignoring her usual strict rules of professionalism. Because not a single witness vouched for it, Orgel threw the whole thing out, and Itsuki couldn't thank him enough. Orgel quickly snapped into a harsher mood, pointing straight at Itsuki and blasting him for constantly wrecking the flow with his disruptions. She blew off steam, firing off every complaint tied to him, and Itsuki just barely managed to fend it off with a weak, shaky defense. Soma calmly begged Itsuki to stop stirring up more trouble for the sake of the Oracle, and he bowed so deeply it looked like respect turned into steel. Origo suddenly crumpled into another coughing fit, and Soma rushed in to steady her, only for her to shove away his help, insisting she was totally fine. With every word caught in her throat, Orgel choked out an apology and said she had to go, because her body was falling apart fast. She got quietly ushered out in a carriage, and Itsuki and Wendy scrubbed their faces while worry clawed at them from the gate. Back inside, Itsuki admitted he was worried sick, still not sure she'd be okay. Then Sort burst in with a cheerful greeting like nothing happened as they came home. The adventurer crew came back with their heads held high, bragging about the job they crushed, and every single member stood there strong and unshakable, like the brutal mission had forged them. They shoved the prize into Itsuki's hands, and even with a few small hiccups, they insisted the whole job went off without a hitch. Right as they were trading stories, a rabbit suddenly burst out of the bag and sent everyone scrambling mid-conversation, completely blindsided. The rabbit bolted and bounced wildly, yanking Wendy's skirt up as it did, and both Wendy and Itsuki froze in shock the instant it happened. Wendy's face went hot as she scolded Itsuki, scrambling to cover herself. Then Itsuki lunged clumsily, trying to grab the rabbit before it slipped away. Out of nowhere, the rabbit wriggled straight into Wendy's skirt, and everyone froze in shock, while Shiro sprinted to grab it back. Later, Orgel crumpled weakly in her mansion bed, her voice barely able to slip past her lips. Two stewards huddled in whispers as her condition spiraled worse. Orgel had collapsed again, and her strength kept draining away. The older man nodded grimly. Lord Hayato's elixir was a total failure, and despair crept across his face like a curse. They told everyone the curse wouldn't break unless only spiritual medicine could save her. Now Orgel's condition is crashing straight into a critical stage. Itsuki sank into silence, drowning in doubt, because the cure-all couldn't save Orgel at all. When Itsuki tore the box open, a bizarre dagger stared back at him. He could only hope this blade held the answer they were desperate to find. Itsuki splashed water on his face, stared at the stubble, and seriously contemplated inventing a rotor trimmer to shave at full speed. He yanked his tie into place with pure resolve, then fell silent, bracing for whatever came next. Orgel got a trembling, careful shove of water from the maid, her frail body already drained by illness. She demanded her hair be styled right then and there, swearing she had to look perfectly neat the moment opportunity finally showed up. As she dressed, her maid slipped away the silence, then confessed her true love for Einchil straight to Orgel. The maid reminded Orgel how adored she truly was for guarding the town and every single person in it. Even though she was battered and weak, Orgel kept her head up, begging her maids to cling to hope and stand strong until it all finally ends. With her courage finally back, Orgel swallowed her fear and swore she'd see her world's light again, no matter what. She yanked the curtain open, stared out at the world, and silently swore she'd stand by the town she loved, no matter what. Orgel, finally ready, snatched the Alchemy Guild's messenger into the room and let Itsuki speak with pure, urgent urgency. Itsuki knocked, stammered out an apology, and got hit with a firm warning. Don't show up again unless you've got a proper appointment. Inside, Itsuki stepped in and bowed with respect. Sitting high and proud, Orgel demanded to know why he'd shown up so suddenly. Orgel flashed a kind smile at his own humble heart, and when Itsuki apologized, she quickly told him to drop the stiff act. With a calm steadiness in his eyes, Itsuki stepped forward and dropped the truth. He had something huge to deliver to her. While everyone stared in shock, he raised a glowing vial and dangled it like a miracle drug that could change everything. The butlers were stunned. Itsuki twisted out of every question about where the drug came from, and he never once gave a straight answer. Itsuki squared up to Orgel, and it instantly felt like her sickness wasn't just illness. It was something darker, way more unnatural. Soma ripped the truth wide open. Orgel wasn't sick at all. He was trapped under a brutal, soul-chilling magical curse. Dardaril, the mastermind behind the assassination plot, pulled the strings and used the butler's betrayal to expose everything. Orgel laid it out plain. Dardaril didn't act from loyalty. He wanted political power, aiming to smash her reputation, topple her, and take her seat. Orgel snapped that Hayato had botched the job, and Itsuki swallowed his pride, admitting it with regret for how cruelly he'd judged Hayato. Itsuki stepped up and thrust the miracle drug toward him, convinced this was the one shot that could still save Orgel. Orgel snatched the vial with shaking hands, choked up with emotion, and whispered a heartfelt thank you. The crowd bowed low to Itsuki, thanking him with trembling voices and begging to pay him back properly for the miracle. Orgel finally got what repayment really meant, and Itsuki froze, scrambling to figure out what in the world she should ask for in return. Itsuki stepped forward with a sincere proposal: make the town peaceful and livable and treat it like his repayment for everything he'd taken. Orgel nodded with a calm, reassuring smile, her eyes brimming with trust, and she agreed to his terms right then. Later, Itsuki strolled through town, and when he spotted something weird by the gate he'd turned toward, curiosity snapped his focus. He strode up to the gate, and there the guards were in a heated shouting match. Then Itsuki kept his voice steady and asked, calm as ever, what was wrong? The guard stared in shock as he clocked Itsuki. Then Itsuki spotted Sort and the others already waiting and snapped at them for making everyone wait. Itsuki shot the girls a quick look, I'm fine, and they bolted out right after, panicking over his safety. To melt the tension, Itsuki waved everyone over for a drink and turned the night around, lifting everyone's spirits. They strolled beneath the open sky, laughing like nothing could break them. Then peace finally settled in, and their bond deepened all over again. Itsuki kicks back under calm skies, sipping tea as he relives peaceful days after delivering that miracle drug. With a soft smile, Itsuki takes a slow sip of Wendy's tea, letting the warmth hit his chest and melt the tension out of his spirit. Rienrich and Yasis show up, all curious about the tea, and start grilling Itsuki about why he's been gone lately. Darwin doesn't hold back. He bluntly calls out Rangja's enslavement, and then he ruthlessly roasts Itsuki for bringing yet another woman into his house. With noisy guests all around, Itsuki snaps inward with regret, wishing again for a quiet, peaceful cup of tea all to himself. Itsuki's instincts light up. He can't shake the feeling that a fresh assassination plot is brewing right under the noses of these powerful guests. Even though his nerves scream, he takes a cautious sip of tea while his guests ooh and ah over every impressive detail in his house. Darwin gushes over the lavish bath and the alchemy lab, and Rainrich fires back that their top-tier magical gear is the real deal, pulled straight from its high-level origins. Meira, Darwin's daughter, clocks the alchemy room's profit potential and throws Itsuki into a wild round of business talk that has him laughing. Even with all her charm, Itsuki still stalls. Darwin's foster daughter, eccentric as they come, and the kind of person who drags trouble in, something he'd rather dodge completely. Darwin snaps into action, corners Itsuki, and demands answers about where the so-called miracle drug really came from. Everyone's eyes snap into focus as Ryan, Rick, and Yasis go dead silent, while Itsuki scrambles, fighting for the right words. Itsuki nervously chuckles, swearing that the goddess handed him this drug the moment he stumbled into this brand new world. Darwin swallows the discussion for the moment, then snaps his tone into gear. He demands to see Itsuki's personal guild card. Itsuki hesitates hard, clearly freaking out about what's on that card, and he resists the request like he's one breath away from cracking. Darwin blurts out Itsuki's guild card, and pure shock hits when he realizes the kid's packing rare skills, like spatial magic and more. Itsuki's hands shake as he nervously explains his pocket money skill, and when he says he pockets a huge payout every single day, the whole room erupts in disbelief. Richest doesn't buy Itsuki's innocent act. He's convinced there's a hidden truth behind that miracle drug, and that Itsuki's already got dangerous, real abilities to match. Right as Darwin slams the button again, Origal barges in and instantly steals the spotlight away from Itsuki's lie. Everyone gathers once more and Origal breezes in, casually spilling how she came back. Her wild, energetic vibe instantly knocks out the suspicion. Origal shocks the whole room by plopping onto Itsuki's lap and cheerfully blurting, "Big brother," like she's always known him. Itsuki stumbles through a painfully awkward denial of intimacy. While Origal won't let go, Richest just laughs at her like a grown-up. Acting this childish at 40 plus is a crime. Origal blurts that she's a legal halfling stuck eternally young thanks to elven lineage, while Mara just stares on, silent, utterly baffled. Origal demands they bathe together, tossing a weird promise at Itsuki, when he swears he never even agreed to. Darwin dodges the questioning and claims he'll celebrate privately later, but the side eyes and teasing make it feel way too suspicious. Origal pumps her fist with pure energy and yells that it's time to rush straight to the bath. Itsuki paces on edge as he escorts Origal and Mara, clinging to worry because Mara's smile won't stop, and he can't shake the feeling her recovery might not be as solid as she acts. Origal hummed in a carefree mood as he undressed, singing like he owned the moment while he confidently got ready to slide into that soothing bath. Itsuki can't believe his eyes as Origal bolts through the halls completely naked, and he's left wondering, seriously, if she's really in her 40s. Suddenly, Mara pops up in daring lingerie and just shrugs, "I'm in," and the second those words hit, Itsuki loses his mind, full panic, total fluster. Itsuki sinks into the tub with both girls, completely blindsided by how insanely close and wrong this whole moment feels. Origal sings the praises of the bath and Itsuki quickly dodges the credit. Mara just flashes a calm, quiet smile like she already knew. Origal spills her deep past with the crew, reliving the wild days when she chased Darwin and Yasis all over the place. She blurts out a sudden question about Wendy and the Red Line girls, and Itsuki can't help but wonder, who does he love the most? Myra boldly cuts him off, making it crystal clear she's done hearing about other women, especially in front of her. Trapped in the bath, Itsuki panics as both girls press him for a romantic decision. Right now, no excuses. Origal and Mara bunked in for the night, yapping nonstop with Itsuki and leaving everyone else wide awake and exhausted. Wendy leaned in with a worried look while he, burnt out and not feeling it, muttered a quiet excuse and slipped away. Wendy sat alone, jaw clenched, trying to convince herself their presence was normal, even as it hurt like hell. She clenched her fists, fought her own emotions, and kept insisting, over and over, that everything was totally fine. Itsuki came back with tea on the tip of her tongue, sensing that she was finally at ease, and handing her the perfect excuse to feel needed. Wendy brewed tea by herself, still reeling from how flustered she'd gotten, and quietly, painfully, she started to feel ashamed. Sword and Shiro caught on to her distant mood, then pressed her for answers, wondering if something had gone down the night before. They hinted that Wendy was jealous of those guests, but Itsuki shut it down fast. No romance, not a chance. Sword blurted out an apology just in case, while panic surged through him because he had zero clue what to do or say next. Torn up by the need to make it right, Itsuki bolted out yelling that he'd apologize, so intense he startled everyone in the room. Ine closed in on Wendy, sensing that something was off, but Wendy brushed her off with shaky, foggy answers and painful hesitation. After a beat of quiet thinking, Aina ditched the usual route and chose a bright, totally unexpected plan. She snatched Wendy's hands and pitched a shared bath right on the spot, catching her completely off guard with that sudden burst of friendliness. Wendy paused for a split second, then followed her anyway, shaken by the sudden offer and thrown off by how strangely warm Aina felt. As she scrubbed Wendy's back, Ine soothed her with soft, gentle words, easing the tension little by little without saying much at all. When he demanded to know why they bathed together, Ine just flashed a calm smile and offered to help rinse him off. Ine lit up as she praised Wendy's beauty, then soothed her with a sincere apology, telling her she'd be right there to listen if her heart was hurting. Wendy's gratitude flared up as she felt Ine's sincerity hit her straight in the heart, and the warmth in that moment made her soften fast. Ine spilled the truth about her limits, and Wendy jumped in fast, shooing aside her own worries and telling Ine she wasn't selfish at all. Aina smirked with understanding, realizing Wendy's feelings went way deeper, because her love for their master wasn't pretend at all, it was real and blazing. Wendy didn't hold back, she confessed her feelings to Itsuki, and Aina quietly wrestled with the mystery of his real nature. They both couldn't stop admiring how dependable, kind, and warm he was, because it was something neither of them had ever seen before. Aina finally confessed that what she felt wasn't the sweet kind of romance, it was the fierce need to back him up, stand by him, and protect him no matter what. They admitted Itsuki's charm and kindness were real, but they swore he'd never, not once, choose to hurt Wendy's feelings. Wendy quietly offered to cook for Aina, grateful for her support and the way she understood her so gently. After their talk, Wendy and Aina erupted in laughter, and every last bit of tension vanished like it was never there. That evening, Renge and Sort clocked Wendy's mood lifting fast, whispering to each other that her bond with Aina had just grown even stronger. Itsuki collapsed on his bed, drained to the bone, still cursing himself for not apologizing to Wendy. Aina burst up to his door out of nowhere, knocking hard and demanding a moment to talk. Caught off guard by the late arrival, Itsuki shot up from his seat, stunned, and still clueless why Aina had come to him so late. Wendy and Aina showed up together in their nightwear, and Itsuki's world flipped. He froze, wide-eyed, utterly speechless. Aina pushed for a private, no-escape resolution, while Wendy fumbled and tried to brush the whole thing off like it wasn't a big deal. Wendy tried to slip away, mortified, but Ine grabbed the moment and urged them to reconcile face-to-face while she watched, right there. Aina later came back flustered and red-faced, and Sorte stood there totally baffled, with no clue what the heck just happened. Itsuki and the others shoot up early. Sort is shouting from the shadows, demanding everyone rush to the mansion's main hall. With a crisis in his voice, Sort slams the household's public morals as broken beyond repair and demands immediate correction. Itsuki's totally thrown off. She can't figure out why she's suddenly getting hit with that wild concern and this dramatic moral campaign today. Sort storms in when he realizes Aina caught something filthy, and rage boils over. She blames Itsuki and lunges at him without a single second to hesitate. Sort struts in like a self-appointed moral cop, slaps down fresh rules, and declares, "I'm the wolf of righteousness, never just a dog." Itsuki clings to Wendy, defending his feelings with steel in his voice, and refuses to back down from the attraction, even as Sort throws objections in his face. Sort's frustration erupts as she tries to bolt, but Ring yanks her back before she can run. Later, Itsuki takes a calm sip like none of this matters, while Wendy stands there, spiraling through everything that just happened. Wendy clocks that Sort's rage is fueled by what happened last night, then bolts to apologize before things explode. Itsuki regrets every harsh word the second it leaves his mouth, so he softly raps on Sort's door, praying he can finally make things right. Sort snaps angrily, insisting no one's there, then Itsuki cuts in gently, apologizing for how far he went yesterday. Blushing, Sort pushes for real sincerity, and Itsuki fires off his apology again. Then Renji shows up, checking in on Aina to see how she's holding up. The second Ine panics hears the word slave, she snaps into retreat mode and rockets down the hallway. Sort broke down, then snapped at Itsuki, calling him trash for messing with Aina and wrecking everything with his reckless emotions. Even through tears, Sort demands he apologize the right way, her hard stare packed with concern, even as her resolve trembles. Renji flashes a warm smile at Itsuki and tells her she needs to hear something personal, and it's important. She admits her body's breaking, soft beds have spoiled her, and these hard floors and rough discomfort hit like a punch. Itsuki steps in with zero hesitation and delivers a massage right away. Then Wrench drops down and bears her back for the treatment. Sort's gut twists, suspicion claws at him. Itsuki, though, won't back down and swears he's got the skills, even bringing up how he used to massage exhausted shoulders during training. Renji's cheeks burn under the relentless pressure, and Itsuki's massage snowballs fast into an experience that's way too stimulating. Renji blurts out a sound by accident, totally overwhelmed by the massage, and Itsuki swears it's just pure therapy, nothing to worry about, totally harmless. When Sort stalls, Itsuki steps in and confidently lifts her, pushing back hard, telling her she's done holding back. Sot screams his protests, but Itsuki plows ahead with the massage anyway, hunting down every last knot of muscle tension. His touch makes her body jerk and Itsuki doesn't panic. He methodically shifts her leg, pressing just right to read every ounce of stiffness. Even with the embarrassment still hanging in the air, Sort finally starts to loosen up, while Itsuki leans in for feedback, determined to help her shake off that soreness. Sort trembled, utterly thrown off as the massage's sudden effect flared heat inside her. She thrashes in panicked fluster, completely overwhelmed, while Itsuki freezes with wide eyes, finally realizing this mess escalated way past what anyone meant. Still burned out from what he's been through, Itsuki looks back and remembers one thing that saved him at work: stress, endless puppy videos. Now standing nose to nose with that fluffy tail, he can't resist any longer. His long-held wish is about to finally come true. Caught on pure instinct, Itsuki snatches her tail, one violent jolt hits, and she reacts like the sensation just electrified her whole body. Sort yelps in sheer embarrassment as someone repeatedly fluffs her sensitive tail. No warning, no mercy, and no restraint. Even though Itsuki keeps pushing through her protests, Sort can't hold it in. She pleads for him to stop, but her reactions betray her. Tears spill as Sort pleads for mercy, but Itsuki won't back down. His reasons get swallowed up by the urgency in the moment. As Sort's scream rips through her sensory overload, her whole body shakes, and right then Itsuki finally realizes things have gone completely off the rails. Later, Itsuki tries to play it off, but it comes out awkward and sheepish, while the others eye him like something off because Sort is acting weird ever since that incident. After his last job paid off, Itsuki gets a fresh potion delivery mission from the Alchemist Guild. Rienrich sinks into his old age, drifting through memories of friends he's lost and cherishing the quiet company that still stays by his side. Itsuki spots the change. Rienrich is slowly melting into gentleness as she grows older, and Shiro jumps in to help the chef cook. Rienrich shoves his feelings down behind a hard front, while the chef plops sweets in his hands, and Shiro beams as he slips out, dodging every last bit of lingering emotion. Itsuki quizzes Shiro about lunch and she blasts out that she wants meat, while a cloaked stranger silently watches from the shadows. Itsuki fires up Shiro with meat teasing, warns her to watch out for veggies, and then, right behind her, some thief slides in so quietly it's almost eerie. The thief shoots forward, Shiro slams into him mid-swing and drops him with one clean, decisive punch. A sickening wave hits, fainting pain, and the thief strikes, tricking everyone mid-swoop. Itsuki and Shiro freeze, totally thrown off by the sudden switch. The thief hurls Itsuki's stolen magic bag like it's payment, then slicks his escape with a burst of slate and a nasty taunt. Smoke erupts all around them. Shiro steadies Itsuki, then fires off skyward to snatch back the stolen item before it's gone for good. The thief barrels through the alleyways, laughing to himself as he shows off. He just robbed the rich, famous local alchemist, and he's loving every second. He thinks he's home free and throws a victory celebration, only to realize Shiro is already in the air, slamming down on him fast. Shiro drops in front of him like a warning, calmly demanding Itsuki's prized magical bag back. Cornered, the thief snaps out a knife and roars threats, trying to scare Shiro into backing away. With zero hesitation, Shiro explodes forward, disarms him in an instant, and tackles him hard, eyes locked on the kill. Shiro clamps the thief's blade in a vice grip and calmly repeats her demand, hand it back. Cornered and drowning in panic, the thief snaps and agrees to hand everything back. No fight left in him. Shiro pops out with a tiny gift, catching him off guard, and even after he tries to rob them, he still chooses kindness. With a jolt of emotion and confusion, the thief peels it open, muttering that it's all foolish. Yet you can clearly see the gesture hit him hard. As the crowd roar swells, Shiro whips her head around. Then panic hits when she realizes she's lost sight of Itsuki somewhere in the chaos of the city. Shiro gets stopped cold when Mira recognizes her from Itsuki's household, and then fires off a sharp question about why she's here. Shiro ends up in Yas's brothel, and the moment he steps inside, the working girls stare in shock, totally baffled as all eyes lock on him. The girls stare at Shiro's outfit in disbelief, and then someone blurts out, Mira brought her in, she was completely lost. Shiro drops into a deep bow and shoots off a heartfelt apology for the chaos she unleashed on her last visit. Inside, the madam shoots Mara a thankful look, while Mara's gushing over Shiro's cuteness and her disgust at the same time kick off a full-on makeover. Mara tells Shiro she's already contacted his master and begs him to just wait together calmly, peacefully, side by side. As she gets dressed as the Shiro, the girls start sizing her up, daring to quiz her age and taste. until one girl chimes in with a sharp, learned verdict. Itsuki barges in, awkwardly scolds the brothel girls, and demands they stop clinging to Shiro, right there before the cut. Days later, in a storm that wouldn't quit, two cloaked strangers showed up, pounded on Itsuki's door, and didn't let up. Inside, Shiro naps and Wendy burst in, shouting for Itsuki, while outside, the guest's arrival loads the whole place with surprise tension. With rain hammering down, the cloaks fall away, and there they are, Hayato and Letty, standing in grim silence right at the door. Wendy swung the door open and ushered Hayato and Letty in, then offered to dry their soaked cloaks from the pouring rain. They stormed into the mansion, and Hayato realized it was Itsuki's place, because he welcomed them in like family. Wendy poured the tea while Hayato shot out an apology for showing up uninvited, and Letty kept her eyes on everything around her like she expected trouble. Hayato sprinted to catch up with Itsuki, then fell back on memories of the hero's calm, steady life and the quiet work he kept doing. Hayato finally opened up and poured out the truth, thanking everyone and apologizing with real sincerity for the misunderstandings from the past. Letty finally confessed the real mission all along, snatched the dungeon elixir, because the Lord's illness hit out of nowhere. Hayato finally owned up to his failure and admitted the elixir mattered, because he understood exactly how heavy that burden crushed Itsuki. Itsuki waved it off like it was nothing, saying he'd never once been desperate for the elixir, and that simple truth helped take the edge off their piling guilt. Hayato replayed every moment the danger exploded, and the party slammed the brakes on the quest when the situation turned into an unstoppable nightmare. Deep in the dungeon, monster after monster flooded the halls, and the ground started to feel unstable, so they had to bolt back right away. Inside the dungeon, Hayato barked for everyone to huddle close, and he hurried off to check on the utterly drained Chris. Chris swore she was fine, but Letty demanded a break, eyes locked on her, worried sick about how she was holding up. Hayato finally agreed to rest, and Chris murmured an apology, so full of guilt that it clung to her, even as her body sagged with weakness. While the others rummaged through supplies, Chris sat by himself, his gut tight with panic as he realized the resources were running out, way faster than anyone wanted to admit. Haunted by the abuse she endured before, Chris cringed at every cruel word and felt uselessness slam into her so hard she couldn't breathe. Letty called to Chris softly and he heard her, but that crushing self-doubt inside him screamed louder. Chris wobbled on his feet and managed a faint reply, then her palm slid onto the wall and a cold mechanical click echoed, like the room had just awakened. A stone trap snapped shut with a violent jolt. Letty screamed, but there was no stopping it anymore. A sudden bolt of danger rockets straight at Chris, and the moment her eyes lock on it, fear slams into her like a wall. Back at the table, Hayato threw his confession down. He took full blame for everything that went wrong during that mission. Itsuki snapped, asking how Chris was doing, and Letty shot back that she'd been right there, and Hayato wasn't to blame. Then Itsuki admitted he'd been stuck in that hospital for a year and a half, while he asked again about Chris like the fear wouldn't let go. Hayato told Chris what happened. She'd lost her right eye, and even the finest potions couldn't mend something that delicate. Hayato wouldn't back down. He plotted to snag the elixir at a secret auction in the capital. Itsuki clocked it instantly. Hayato wasn't just helping out, he was determined to save Chris himself because she mattered to him more than anything. Once the rain finally stopped, Hayato and Letty slipped away from the scene, their hearts burning with a quiet, renewed hope. Even though Itsuki was younger in rank, he still stepped up, offering real emotional comfort and guiding the way like a life senior. Hayato's smile lit up with relief. Itsuki's honesty hit hard, and he urged them to hit the auction together. Stunned, Itsuki realized he'd never actually left town at all. He paused at first, then forced himself to stay open-minded. They finally made the call. Once the travel was set, they'd be out of there in just 3 days. Itsuki had a feeling Wendy and Shiro would show up, and sure enough, right then, their journey to the capital kicked off. Letty yanked Hayato's attention the moment he hesitated. She had something burning in her chest, but the words wouldn't come. Flustered to the core, Letty refused to spill a single detail, so Itsuki teased her, clocking that there was more than friendship in the air and she just wasn't ready to talk. Itsuki teased, hinting at Letty's feelings. Then Hayato went stone still, and Letty's face went hot with embarrassment as the whole misunderstanding landed. Letty snapped at both of them, calling them out for being painfully insensitive, like they couldn't read the room when it came to personal questions about affection. Meanwhile, the teammate caught Chris skipping meals again, and worry flared as she gently called out, "Hey, are you okay?" Chris sat alone in crushing silence, knees pulled tight, wrestling with pain, drowning in shame, and watching despair claw its way in. Me slipped in quietly, eyes down, and Emily froze mid-read when she sensed something off about her presence. Chris hadn't eaten, and when Emily clutched him tight, she finally felt it. Her grief hit harder than that injury ever did. Hayato and Letty stumbled back, stunned by what they saw. Emily stayed cool and simply told them Chris wasn't doing well. Emily blurted her worries with a shaky voice, and Hayato instantly got it. He stepped forward and volunteered to personally check on Chris. Hayato crept up to the door in dead silence, forcing his nerves to steel themselves before he faced Chris's hushed, crushing struggle. Hayato hovered outside Chris's room, pouring out heartfelt apologies while guilt quietly churned inside his chest. Inside, Chris curled up tight and whispered apologies into the void, drowning in loneliness and regret like it had a hold on his heart. Next morning, the crew huddled around the table, holding their breath and praying Chris would recover, just hoping for peace to finally settle in. Letty shot out a plan. Hayato stalled for a second and Emily stayed silent, but her face gave away a cautious yes. Letty brought up Itsuki, his offer to help if they ever needed it, and Hayato started taking that idea seriously right then. Emily practically snapped at Hayato to stop hauling everything by himself, and at last he caved, ready to go ask Itsuki for help. Itsuki didn't waste a second. He met them with warmth, invited everyone to his house, and promised full support without even a hint of hesitation. Itsuki broke down everything for Wendy, and she lit up, warm as ever, promising to help right away, no doubts, no questions. Wendy nodded with a soft smile, already ready to jump in and help however she could. That night, the whole crew rolled up to Itsuki's place, greeted with open arms, and they couldn't stop thanking him for everything he'd done. They stood shoulder to shoulder in front of Itsuki, begging for help with raw sincerity, while Chris stayed shut, still emotionally miles away. Wendy caught the strain in Chris's face and gave her a soft, careful look, and Itsuki silently clocked the thick, tangled emotions in the air. Emily and Wendy weren't strangers to drama. Emily even pulled Itsuki aside and warned her seriously, because Wendy's feelings weren't something you mess around with. Over dinner, Itsuki blurted out their journey plans and the whole group loosened up at once, chilling together while savoring his warm, welcoming hospitality. As I tore into every bite with pure joy, Letty blushed and stole glances, shocked at just how insanely delicious the food was. Itsuki offered him the bath and he hesitated for a beat. Then the girls leaned in, totally hooked by his fearless confidence. Itsuki proudly traced the bath's roots, revealing it was built to mimic the one from Mira's homeland. I dragged Letty along, grinning like it was mission time. Emily jumped in and nodded hard, and after that, Letty finally caved, totally flustered but ready to go. Wendy tugged Chris aside with a soft hand, and right in the middle of it, Itsuki kept needling Hayato about joining, until everybody snapped their eyes at him and fired off scoldings. Chris quietly hustled to set out the towels, refusing any praise from her, staying emotionally shut down, yet still pushing herself to help. Chris answered softly, savoring every bite and calling the food delicious, and somehow you could tell she was grateful, sweet, rare, and still wrapped in that withdrawn, fragile mood. Wendy lit up at Chris's cooking, and Chris, shocked and still doubting, paused, unsure he should even take that sudden praise. Chris finally broke and confessed her real feelings, then decided she was going to leave Hayato's party for good. Thinking her injury had dragged them to a crawl, Chris clenched with shame for slowing down their vital quest. With raw emotion flooding her, Chris blurted out in tears, sure she didn't belong with the group anymore. Wendy asked Chris straight to the point, was she really choosing what her heart wanted, or was it just her fear pulling the strings? Chris trembled with inner war, and then Letty slipped in without a sound, calling his name with steady, worried strength. Everyone reassured Chris because without her, they'd be in trouble, no question. And the more she showed up, especially with those meals, the more everyone realized just how much she mattered. Hayato poured his heart out because Chris had saved them again and again, and now he was begging her to stay. Later on, Itsuki pulled Wendy aside and thanked her in private. Wendy just smiled, knowing her words had finally landed with Chris. Letty softly guides Chris through her bath, telling her to lean on others more as she heals. Chris flinches at the water, but Letty soothes her with gentle, careful movements. Letty sweet-talks Chris into handing over his soup, and Chris answers with a quiet, heartfelt thank you. Chris flashes a warm smile, soaking up the praise for her cooking, and then, Right on the spot, she agrees to Letty's request with zero hesitation. With the others alongside them, they sink into the steaming hot bath, letting warmth wash over them as peace, quiet, and pure joy take over. Itsuki proudly unveils a dazzling set of enchanted rings, each one guarding you, toughening your defenses, and supercharging your magic. He tells them their power doesn't come from training, it comes from closeness, because the more emotionally bonded a pair becomes, the stronger they grow. Hayato stared at the craftsmanship in awe, shocked by how much power it carried, while Itsuki teased, half joking, that it screamed wedding symbolism. Even with all the teasing flying around, Itsuki steps in with a sincere offer, handing them over as gifts, while he shrugs off Hayato's discomfort and keeps apologizing when Hayato pushes back. They walk side by side and Itsuki shrugs it off like it's nothing, just gratitude, while a deeper meaning quietly simmers behind that gesture. Sort stormed in, all fire and fury, and blurted out a massive demand for answers that slammed into Itsuki like a punch. Itsuki calmly asks why her face is so red, and then she slams into Itsuki with a total storm of complaints. The girls rush in, panicked by the shock of the news. Sort barrels in right behind them, pushing forward like, "Let me in too." In a burst of pure frustration, she lunges at Hayato and screams that there's no way they can possibly get ready on notice this short. As tempers ignite, Sort snaps at Itsuki's selfishness, then demands to know who Hayato really is. Hayato steps up and introduces himself with full confidence, then drops the truth: he's the Dragon Slayer hero. The Red Line crew lights up, introduces themselves with a friendly grin, and starts playfully battling for Hayato's attention, pushing him to earn their respect. Everyone gushes over Hayato's wins, but Sort snorts and grumbles that he keeps making sudden moves and never gives anyone a heads up. Hayato blurts out an apology, but Sort won't let it slide. He demands real appreciation and calls Hayato out for his usual lack of gratitude and blind awareness. Refusing to be left in the dust, Sorte throws her head up and declares she's not staying home while everyone else goes on to adventure. Aina and Renji jump in to join the trip on the spot, while Itsuki frets non-stop about whether they're even ready. To everyone's shock, Itsuki drops the bombshell: he's already mapped out the whole trip, from travel and lodging to even their underwear. Sort E snaps in total disbelief at Itsuki knowing their sizes, then blurts that he's scary and downright shameless. Hayato bows and tears up a real apology, owning every bit of trouble his plans sparked and admitting the chaos they unleashed was never supposed to happen. Sort accepts the apology with a warm smile like, "Yeah, getting bossed around by my master, been there, done that." Hayato turned to the girls and begged them to watch over Itsuki, because in his eyes, this kid wasn't just someone to save, he was a friend worth protecting. The girls shoot back with total confidence, swearing it's just obvious. Sort steps forward, blazing with her usual dramatic, heartfelt fire. Shiro explodes into the moment by jumping in beside Sort, swearing with full devotion that he'll defend their beloved master no matter what. Suddenly, Emily and Letty crept up behind Hayato, whispering his name in eerie, breathy excitement. In the bath area, the girls are spinning with dizziness as Hayato and the others scramble to wrestle the chaos under control. Night settles in so quietly, you can almost hear the calm sky watching the house after the chaos of the day. At dawn, Itsuki leans out of the carriage and waves goodbye, his mind calm, his heart pounding with what's next. With a grin, he declares it time to leave. Next stop, the Imperial capital, and after that, everything beyond. Itsuki burst in with a bright smile, telling everyone the weather was perfect for their ride to the capital. The girls hung back with open guides, listening in total silence as he laid out the travel rules and warned them of every danger. Even with that cheerful goodbye from Sort and Renji, they were wiped out just trying to slog through the insane, complicated preparation handbook. Aina told me trip planning was basically a sacred ritual in Itsuki's world, and the moment he got started, you could tell he loved every second. Sort leaned in, eyes bright with curiosity, and demanded to know if those brand new travel outfits were truly meant for the big preparations. Aina and Renji frowned in shock, because everything Itsuki handed them was outrageously high quality. Itsuki shot them a confident grin and swore he'd never let their crew down or embarrass his companions, not as their steady group leader. Sort clocked him instantly, then snapped a warning: "Don't you dare guess clothing sizes like that recklessly." Wendy burst onto the scene in a special outfit, and when the moment hit, it was clear This outfit was a powerful gift from their very first meeting. Sort wore a smug grin while Wendy looked away in a shy panic, and Itsuki scratched the back of his head, clearly rattled. With excitement roaring in his chest, Shiro jumped onto Itsuki's back and demanded, "Move faster right now." The whole crew slipped out of the estate in a solid horse carriage, and Itsuki took the reins with unshakable confidence. Everyone relaxed into bright smiles, and the air buzzed with easy, casual chatter as the trip kicked off peaceful and smooth. Their carriage rumbled past towering city walls, closing in on the main gate that marked the very start of their journey. Hayato and Letty beamed at them right at the gate, waving them through like honored guests with warm smiles and respectful nods. Carriages roll forward at a calm, steady pace down the broad road, with quiet hills looming on both sides and distant trees watching from afar. Itsuki's shoulders started aching from all that riding, so he rubbed his back hard while forcing himself to keep it together. Hayato figured he'd have 2 days to make it to the capital, until something strange suddenly snapped his attention. A strange little round creature chirped right next to Itsuki's foot, and suddenly everyone nearby couldn't help staring. The girls snapped to attention, already calling it a threat, so they yanked their weapons out just as it screamed. Startled by the harmless little creature, Itsuki clung to Hayato, trembling hard while the whole group just awkwardly stood there and stared. The creature somersaulted around like it was playing, and when it flipped over, you saw the truth. It wasn't a threat at all, just a harmless little caterpillar kid. Shiro held it out with a gentle touch to reassure Itsuki, but Itsuki erupted in panic and screamed that it had to be taken off right now. Nearby girls sprinted over, totally thrown off by all the commotion because they figured something serious, or downright dangerous, had gone down. Itsuki clung to Hayato with white-knuckled fear, squeaking at the insects he couldn't stand, while Hayato just sighed and gave in. As the sun sank behind the lake, carriage wheels rumbled over savage terrain, grinding on in a quiet, relentless crawl. Hayato called for a camp stop before nightfall, and Itsuki nodded, so they pulled the carriages to a stop. The squad slid off their mounts, stretched their limbs, and started packing gear and rations as the knights tiptoed through the forest like shadows. Itsuki and Hayato rushed to a quiet stream, grabbed the buckets, and hauled water back while Aina barked instructions like a mission briefing. Kicking back by the riverside, Itsuki admitted his camping skills started as anime inspiration. Then he grinned because he actually loved every second of it. As Itsuki went to fetch water, he spotted a unicorn by the waterfall, froze mid-step, and gawked at it like he'd just seen magic. The unicorn suddenly showed a horrifying, wiggling face, and Hayato froze in silence while Itsuki's panic erupted. Hayato tossed out a casually horrifying description of a horse moth species, and Itsuki's face went pale as he begged him to stop, like he couldn't take it anymore. Seeing the unicorn standing tall and staring them down, they both backed away in careful steps, yet the buckets were still overflowing. Meanwhile, the girls strutted back triumphantly with meat for dinner, totally clueless about that bizarre unicorn they'd run into. Wendy's stew lit up everyone's faces. Chris even raved about her cooking, and she just couldn't resist, offering to share her recipe right then.